The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings, providing it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. We have members of the public present at the moment, so I don't need to declare anything out there. Only committee members present in the meeting room may vote on any agenda item. We have a number of people in attendance as virtual participants, and I request that they use the raise hand function within the system if they wish to contribute and to introduce themselves when they're called upon. So, welcome everybody, officers and councillors. We have decided to make this first meeting quite a broad briefing, basically, so that the new council members can basically settle down with it all. It's a huge area of concern, as we all know, healthcare and wellbeing. Gosh, what a remit. So agenda item 1 on our paper today is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Chair, we don't have any apologies for absence, although I do know that Councillor Dave Davies has joined us via Zoom, so Councillor Davies will be able to participate in the meeting when he wishes to do so, but won't be able to exercise a vote.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davies, could I just confirm you can see and hear us? Hello?
You're on mute for a second.
Councillor Davies, could you unmute yourself? Oh. Or can we unmute him? Anybody? Hi, Councillor Davies, welcome. Could you just confirm that you can see and hear us?
Reason I think a little bit on my screen, so we may have some connectivity issue. You may need to come back. Go to come back in again.
I have no sound. Is that just me?
Sadly, it is just you, I hope.
They say we can hear you okay online.
That's Matt Pierce, though. And clearly Councillor Stoddard can hear us as well.
Okay. So I wonder, could we put in the chat for Councillor Davies to go out and come back, please?
I'll do that when you carry on.
Thank you. Okay, so there are no named substitutes, I have no apologies. So item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest in any agenda item? Nope. Okay. So item 4 on the agenda are the minutes. So the minutes document of the meeting from the 23rd of January this year are included in this pack, pages 13 to 19 for approval. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. And as we only have 2 continuing committee members of that, no,
just one now.
just one now. Okay, so it's you.
I'm content for you to sign them.
Thank you very much. So I will sign those in due course. So we move on. Questions from members of the public. And I understand that no questions have been received from members of the public on this occasion, as there are no questions from any councillors either.
Nothing's occasion.
Okay. This is all going very quickly, but we won't have a problem with that. So item 7 on the agenda. This is an introduction into the services within the portfolio of health, care and wellbeing. This scrutiny committee has been tasked with a huge gambit here. So the purpose of it is to provide an overview of the services within the portfolio of the committee. This includes good practice, challenges, and also to provide context for the committee to identify any items that we wish to explore further as part of our ongoing work. As I said briefly earlier, this is an unusual item because this is our first commitment to this committee. So I welcome all of your input. So without further ado, we're going to hand over to Hilary Hall, Corporate Director, Community Wellbeing, to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've got a presentation for you, and we're all here on duty today. The presentation is quite wordy. We're not intending to read it out word for word. We're going to pick out the key points, but what we will do is make sure that you have the presentation after the meeting, more as a reference copy that you can go back to. The aim of the presentation is very much to set out an overview of the services from a council perspective. I'm very aware that this committee also covers health, and happy to pick up any questions or queries around that after we've talked about the council services, because clearly that's also a big part of your remit as well. So we have got a presentation which Hayley, who's online, hopefully will be able to bring up or share.
Good afternoon, Hayley. Hayley Doyle, are you hearing us and seeing us?
Yes, yeah, I'm just pulling it up now. It's just froze a minute, so just bear with me.
Perfect, thank you, Hayley.
Thanks.
Just while the presentation's coming up, we've split it by each of the service areas. What I suggest is if we just take a break at the end of each part for any immediate questions, and then obviously there's ample opportunity thereafter for more questions, but just to break it up a bit so we're not onslaughting you with information all the time.
You don't want PowerPoint overload.
No, very conscious.
Can you see that now?
Yeah, do you want to put it on slideshow?
Yeah.
Just before you start, Hayley, Councillor Gandhi, welcome. As Cabinet Member for this portfolio area, you are very, very welcome.
I just wanted to apologise for not being there in person, and I wasn't expecting to be there at all, actually. But I did manage to get back from the ferry at Portsmouth this morning just in time, so I will be listening with interest to your discussions.
Thank you very much for hot-footing it back to Herefordshire. You're very welcome.
Okay, so if I just do a bit of introduction, if you could go to the next slide, Hayley. This feels a bit. So as I say, this is really to set out an overview of the services and to give you a bit of context for your work programme, forthcoming work programme. We've identified some areas already in the work programme, but I'm sure there will be others that you may want to add. And as I say, we've tried to kind of give you a bit of an overview as well as areas of good practice and some of the challenges that we're facing, just to hope give you that rounded picture. Could go to the next slide, Hayley. So in terms of community wellbeing, we cover a wide range. This is where we talk about community wellbeing being about connecting and belonging to the place where people live. It's about the work that we do that people feel safe and have pride in their community. And we think of it much more as just belonging to something. It's about people working together and doing things together that makes belonging matter to that community. So it really underpins all of the work that we do in the directorate. If you could go to the next slide, Hayley. So this in very, more detail will come out, but these are the areas that we cover. So the communities area is around talk community, the cultural services. Obviously cultural services and libraries doesn't sit with this committee, and just talk community does, but we wanted to give you that, the complete picture. We have social care delivery, which is very much around adult social care that Mandy will talk about. All ages commissioning, so this is commissioning services for children and adults. It's not just adults, sits within this directorate. Public health, and I know that you've had, Matt had done an introduction to public health the other week, but that's a key part of the directorate. We have housing within the directorate, and then prevention and support, which covers technology-enabled living and occupational therapy and financial assessment. So we do run across a whole wide range of services and provision, very much focused on people. Really, the Economy and Environment Directorate is very much around place, and our directorate, I suppose in simple terms, is very much concerned with people and enabling them to feel safe and live fulfilled lives. If you could move to the next slide, Hayley. So we have a transformation strategy, and I appreciate transformation as a bit of an overused word these days, but our strategy is very much around where can we improve. So I came into post in June 2022, so I've been here just over a year, and really looking at all aspects of the directorate and where could we work better and more efficiently, and with our partners in some areas where that makes sense, and with other partners within the council where that makes sense, to improve the services that we provide. So I won't go into these in details. I'm very happy to share the strategy with you. But for us, having a stable workforce, you know, all the challenges around recruitment and retention for the council, that's a huge issue for us, particularly in adult social care and occupational therapy, where we really struggle to recruit. So we've got a whole focus of our transformation is around ensuring we have a stable and engaged workforce. Doing a lot of work around that edge of care and prevention. We don't want people falling into crisis. Clearly people's needs deteriorate as they get older and with conditions, but actually a lot of the work we're trying to do is around that edge of care and that prevention model. Where people do need care and support, we're looking at much more integration, particularly with our health partners, and Councillor Crockett and Councillor Bartlett will be aware of quite a lot of the work that we've done there over the years. But again, this is looking much more at the things that we can do to complement the work that we already do internally. Our modern cultural assets, and I won't dwell on it because it's not the remit of this committee, is obviously around libraries, museums and our cultural services and leisure. It's a big part of our transformation, and it would be wrong to exclude it. And then the final bit is around process efficiency. How do we do the things that we're doing more efficiently and effectively? We know that there's lots of handoffs in a number of our processes between the council, between Hoople, between other partners. How do we make that much more efficient and streamlined? Particularly thinking about our financial processes. Adult social care is one of those services where there is a charging regime, there is an assessment and a means test. How do we make that process in a way that works for the people that we're providing care and support to, but is also streamlined and efficient from our point of view? That's just one example of the work we're doing now. And all of that is designed to deliver solutions with the people that we're providing services to and their carers. So having a real focus on working with people, not doing to people. Talked about integrating with partners where that makes sense to do so. This isn't just integration for integration's sake, it's actually highlighting those opportunities where it really makes sense. And clearly value for money and efficiency has got to be the bedrock of what we're doing to ensure that we derive the maximum efficiency from it. That's a really whistle-stop tour. It's a massive piece, and you'll see throughout the presentation people referring to the transformation strategy because it cuts across all of our services. But I just wanted to give you that highlight. I'm going to stop talking, which will be a blessed relief to everyone, I'm sure. I'm now going to go into the various service areas. Mandy's area is the first area, which is adult social care. As I say, perhaps if we do it in chunks, Chair, and after each one, people are not going to talk for long at you, I promise. What we're seeking to do is just talk around some key points, and as I say, the presentation will be available for you afterwards as a reference point going forward.
Okay, thank you, Hilary. I was going to ask every officer to introduce themselves, and I was going to go first of all to Leslie to your left, but we'll do it on the programme that you've already prescribed, shall we say. So over to Mandy.
Hello everybody, I'm Mandy Appleby, Service Director for Social Care Delivery. I'm going to talk you through, not in great depth, as Hilary says, but there will be some slides to complement what I'm saying, but just to give you a flavour of social care delivery and what we're about and what some of our challenges are. So we pick up people at the point of referral, often when things are not going very right for people. People may have been in hospital or they may have deteriorated for various reasons with a range of issues that now look as though they may need support and assistance from social care provision. Our prevention agenda also is obviously part of that, and but much of our front door services pick up at that point and work with people to see if they need to go on for a statutory care need assessment. And a core part of my area is around our duty to assess the need, eligibility for those services, helping people find those services, making sure that other assessments such as financial assessments take place, that our partners, health and care professionals are part of that, about that conversation. We rely on a range of legislation to do that, to enable us to act with the council. Key legislation includes the Care Act, as I've just mentioned, Mental Capacity Act, Health and Care, latest bill that went through in 2023, the West Midlands Multi-Agency Safeguarding Policy, which enables us to, with our partners, safeguard those people who are at risk of harm and abuse. Many of you may have heard about discharge to assess, so I thought I'd put that there because that's a key part of our work, is ensuring that people are discharged from hospital as safely as possible with our health partners. So our social work provision is available to those in greatest need. Often don't realise we work 52 weeks of the year, 24 hours a day. There is access to people most in need to a social worker. And we have a range of teams which are identified in the presentation, which you can refer to, that range from everything from people who are specialists in their field, around mental health, mental capacity, safeguarding, etc. And we have one remaining CQC service. We did registered service. We used to have a range of services which have now been transferred to Hoople. That's largely our the Home First and Hillside and a couple of other residential services. But we have Shared Lives, which is our one remaining service, which offers a different option of care and support for people. Around people sharing their homes with somebody with eligible social care needs, which you'll hear more about in the future, I'm sure. So we have many challenges, but many opportunities, and we're never daunted by the challenges in social care. We always, and we know we've got a great team. I've got a great team around me here in the council and beyond with our key partners to support us. But meeting our statutory duties during a period of recruitment challenges, that is well known for Herefordshire, but it also includes the social care too. We have increasing demand and higher acuity of people coming through needing care and support, so that's a challenge. And we've got market challenges, which I know that my colleague Kaylee Doyle has included in her presentation too. Having available and affordable capacity and choice is incredibly important. As social care workers, we can only capture the help, this care and support that's actually out there in the community. We can't create it out of thin air, other than that which, of course, loving families and carers and neighbours and communities also provide an exceptional amount, a level of support for people in need. Opportunities. Hillary's mentioned our transformation programme, and absolutely that involves social care delivery too. We've got a commitment in our community wellbeing to develop and improving our customers' experience. And we're looking at always to new approaches, encouraging a varied market for care and support provision. We've got our CQC readiness now under the auspices of CQC regulations.
Might it be helpful if you explained what that means?
Care Quality Commission, who will now be regulating social care services going forward. I see that as a real opportunity, as well as a challenge, going forward to really provide that bedrock of what is, good practice, what is, and I'm sure that will be of what the public will want to see. So I think that we see that as an opportunity. Digital technology and really making use of that, and social care delivery, making sure people know what's out there and accessible to them. And we've got the onset of things like shared care records, which is now coming to help with social care. So we will be able to perhaps look at information once and not having to make repeated phone calls. We'll be able to see what's happening to people if they're in hospital on their plan, for example, to enable them to perhaps leave hospital more quickly. So ensuring people with health and care needs benefit from community initiatives and resources and equalities. And it's my colleague Leslie from the community, I'm sure will be discussing about that, but really accessing what I was talking about before, good neighbour schemes, community hubs, etc. So important to that overall aspect of what we do, is connecting people up to whatever is out there. And I thought before I finished, I'd share some of our achievements and good practice. It's been welcome, and we've had really good positive feedback on. And one of those is the introduction in 2022 of new team, our Care Act assessment team, which assesses people who have already been discharged from hospital. That's their key focus. So instead of people being responsible of all teams, we've just got one team who focuses on those people, and that's one team that providers can liaise with, families can liaise with, and the hospital can liaise with, as well as the other health communities, and that's been really positively received. But there's been other as well that we've talked about, strength in partnership with our health colleagues. We've had actually quite a low level of complaints that come through, although we really make a great effort to welcome any complaints and make sure that we learn from them. We've got a long-awaited recruitment of the principal social worker now in place, which has been really welcome to our department. And we're also enjoying quite consistent positive feedback from the courts through our dealings with complex people with complex life challenges, around our safeguarding and around our court assessments and putting people's needs first. So just a range of good practice that's been noted.
Thank you, Mandy. Could I just ask you a couple of things, really? Social care delivery, we all, I'm sure, appreciate the many challenges of that, and the need is probably not meeting the demand. So how are we looking forward to this increasing need versus demand in this council?
Well, one key key way of doing that, I think we've actually started doing that quite a while ago. We introduced the Talk Community Programme, which in essence is really harnessing and understanding what services and universal services are out there and that can support us. I think it's about really linking up with our partners to make sure that within our own directorate, public health, the talk community teams of community brokers, etc., and really reaching out and making sure that our social workers are well connected into the community, getting to people as early as possible. I think the earlier we get to people, the earlier that we put in technology, the earlier that we have our healthcare needs met, our dentistry needs met. I think those are the focuses the focus points that we need to consider.
Thank you. You did mention technology then, and we'll have Lee, I'm sure, in a minute. Did you want to add something, Harry?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, Chair, that we have in Herefordshire a lot of people who fund their own care, so actually don't come through our services, so they're funding their own care, be it in a residential home or be it care in their own homes. And a part of the transformation strategy for us is trying to understand who those people are that fund their own care, because at some point their income is going to fall below the threshold and they will need to probably have care funded by us. Actually, if we don't know at what point that happens, that makes it really difficult for us to plan. Now, we're not going to eyeball someone on their doorstep and find out their circumstances, but part of what we want to do is try and get a better early warning system, if you like, of that, because that has massive implications for us. If you think about 80% of people are funding their own care, that's huge when their income does fall below the threshold. So I just wanted to add that because I think that's an important context in Herefordshire that I think is different from other areas.
Can I just ask, Chair, and so how you've said it's a really difficult thing to do and you can't eyeball people on this, so what ways are you thinking about trying to at least start that process?
Well, some of that, as Mandy's mentioned, is about the work with partners, so GPs and other health colleagues may well already have knowledge of that. There's some of the work doing with the care homes themselves so that we get an early warning from the care. That's not about disclosing personal information or anything like that, but it's just getting that better insight. We've got good relationships with our care homes, and it's about how we use them more positively to just get a sense of when we might expect. And what we are seeing is that obviously with the cost of living, prices have increased, fees have increased for care homes. People that previously thought that they could afford to fund their own care for, say, 2 years, whatever the period of time, they're running out of money quicker, and therefore they're coming through to us sooner than we might. Or even people thought they never would have to come to the council are now having to come to the council. And I think that's a real challenge for us because we have to do that sensitively, and we have to understand, it's not about inappropriately sharing information, but it is trying to get a better sense of when we can expect some of that potentially to come through the door. So that, because we don't want people to be in crisis, and inevitably when people run out of money, that's a crisis for them. So it's about how we deal with that and try and smooth that out. So we get as I say, it's about early warning more than
It would strike me that one of the most difficult sectors of that would be the people who are in their own home, paying for their own care, as you say, possibly thinking that their savings will last them for a long time, and they don't. But I can't imagine a scenario where we can very easily get any information about that sector of our concern, which probably is quite a large sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas the care homes is slightly more, say easy, but easier to. And I think it's some of the work through Talk Community colleagues about those community organisations that might have not working with people, but I have networks with people. And again, it's as much as anything, it's that early warning. Are there things that we could do? Are people maximising the benefits that they're receiving? It's another key part for me. Not everyone is claiming the benefits to which they're entitled. It's about how we've got a very, very small team that Lee will mention that helps people to maximise the benefits that they could receive. And it's all of those, they might seem quite small, but they're quite pivotal in terms of ensuring people are leading the best life that they can within the resources that they've got.
Absolutely, and whether you're a self-funder or not, you should have access to your schemes, your community hubs, technology, the advice that we can provide, and connectivity around technology, support. So there's a rich range that each of our different departments has to offer people who are self-funders, particularly mindful of those that may fall out of being a self-funder.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because I actually have two of those self-funders in my family. One's 95, one's 87. They are selling their properties so that hopefully they can fund their care for, the rest of their life, but who knows? We need to capture that evidence so that by the time they've used up all their money, they're not, dropping in at the last point. I just wondered whether we could capture something in the D2A process that highlights that self-funder or non-self-funder.
Discharge to assess.
Sorry, yes. Well done, Kevin, I'm sorry. You must shout at me if I slip into the old jargon stuff. But
I can assure you that it's really important that people understand at that point what they can access for themselves.
yeah,
So absolutely, we've integrated them into our discharge to assess. We're currently reviewing that and making sure that
I really need to know that is working as well. So that would be great. One of the other things you mentioned before we go on to Councillor Bartlett is talk community, and yes, we really need to cover talk community in greater depth, and that will be in our January programme. So we look forward to that one. Because again, I still feel that some councillors, never mind the general public, do not understand the whole programme and its complexities and its use. So that would be a really good one. Councillor Bartlett, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, no, I was just wondering if I've got the hang of this. I mean, we're putting our hands up, whether it's just a general roundtable discussion, you just jump in and hope for the best. No,
Please indicate, and I'll try and keep my eyes on everybody.
So just talking about the self-funders and that work that you're trying to do behind the scenes so that you can get ahead of the wave of who can't afford care and where the pressures are on what we need to provide. So thinking certainly about like a town like Leominster, we have within the town centre a huge amount of rental properties, and of course everybody talks about Generation X, the rental generation, whatever they are. So where do we see the challenges from the rise in renters who are getting older, and particularly some of the renters, think about some of the renters in Leicester Town Centre, who are possibly not living the healthiest of lifestyles in the property that's available. So do we actually know what kind of challenge that's going to present as they get older, as they get towards retirement, so they're more likely to be dependent on benefits and housing benefit in particular, whether there is a change from the large house people that are, as you say, fully selling their properties to provide their own care. They actually don't have any properties to sell anymore. I mean, do you think there's a balance or an imbalance going on there?
I think it's definitely got to be factored in for that future analysis, because you're right, there is historically we've talked about people who have their own property and will sell their property, and that releases a certain amount. but we are seeing more people renting. And so I think for me, part of the work we're doing is about that future forward. And it's looking at that change in demography, change in lifestyle, if you like. And I, Matt, I think, has talked to people about the joint strategic needs assessment. It's about how we use the information in that joint strategic needs assessment to inform the modelling that we do going forward. And because we've got to look at this as a sort of 10-year trajectory, not just what's going to happen next year, which is quite difficult to do, isn't it, to look 10 years ahead? But I think we've got to do it and use all that available data that we've got. So it's still a bit of an evolving work in progress, and many other authorities haven't really done much work around it. So I'm trying to kind of work with those authorities that are doing work around it to see what we can learn from them in terms of how they've approached it.
Sir Thomas.
I don't need it, but I'll turn it off. Do you think when my mother retired, she was ex-nurse, farmer's wife, but she went off to be home help, and 3 of her clients were in a sheltered housing, which I think is still there in New Harold. There were people, she used to say they were, well, 2 of her clients to start with, which if she didn't go in every day, every morning, they just would not have been able to survive. But they were kept out of old people's homes and out of the care system as such because of that. Do you think, there's getting a lot more of us about now, our sort of more senior, do you think probably it's time we started to expand? Because I know there was a period of big contraction in that sheltered housing. Is it not about time that we perhaps expanded it?
Yeah, I think we have to look at all of the different options. Our main focus is to try and support people in their own homes, whatever that home is, and that might be sheltered, it might be genuinely their own home in the sense of that. And I think we have to look at the whole range of housing options, and I think that has to be part of all of that modelling going forward. Because I think, and we do know, and I don't want to steal Hayley's thunder, but we do struggle to recruit carers to support people in their own homes. So that's a big challenge for us, particularly at the moment. We have got more come onto the framework, but that remains a challenge in terms of having sufficient carers in the county who will go into people's homes to support them. It's not helped by having such a large rural county. I mean, we know it takes ages to travel from one end to the other. You can imagine if you're providing care, the challenges that brings. So I think there's a whole range of things that we need to look at as we start to forecast for the future and model what we should be doing. All of these things cost money, and it's how we do it in the most efficient way and effective way as well. Because we don't have natural partners around our borders in the sense of, if you were in a more populated southeast, which is where I worked previously, you could do a lot more cross-border work because it was a much more densely populated area. In Herefordshire, we have to look at different options because we do have that sparsity of population and a big rural area. I appreciate we have urban centres, but if you look at the general geography, that creates challenges for any service.
Because one of my other hats is planning, and we've got some very big planning sites going to come up, 300, 400, 500 houses. It wouldn't be particularly difficult to influence those developers to put what I've just said, like sheltered or more. We're just not building the right sort of houses, so you're not getting people moving. You're not getting an elderly couple moving out of a 3-bedroom house into a bungalow because they're not there. And I think it's a time that probably the planning policy, we could do a lot more.
Yes, I'm sure Hayley, when she talks, because Hayley's head of housing, will talk more about that, but Hayley does work very closely with developers to try and, so with the data that she's got, to try and work with the developers to identify houses that could be adapted, or bungalows instead of houses, whatever. But I think that's a big part of the work that Hayley does, and she'll be able to reference that when she speaks. But I agree with you, that is a key area for us, and understanding that pipeline of need, if you like, that needs to come through, so that we're preparing for 3, 4, 5, 10 years hence, rather than just the immediacy of what's hitting our door now. So that data, that forecasting is really, really important as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'm just glad I'm not sitting next to you, because you say seniors in this room, and we're like, oh, okay. But I'd probably be identified as one of those seniors. But importantly, I think the concept of intergenerational living is definitely on this council's radar, and we will be following those programmes through. So thank you. Who's next up?
Hayley. Doyle. Too many Hayleys. Hayley Doyle. All age commission.
Surely not.
Oh, hi everybody, I'm Hayley Doyle, and I'm the Service Director for All Age Commissioning. So I joined Herefordshire in January this year, and I've been working with the commissioning team to develop our approach across our All Age Commissioning, and wanted to share with you today an overview of where we are up to as a service, but also what we're responsible for, some of the strategic priorities for commissioning, and then some of our challenges and opportunities. So the commissioning service is responsible across the age range from cradle to grave, and we do commission adult care and support services, and that's for people who are 18 years and over, and that includes our working age adults, because we have a number of clients who are working age but might have serious and enduring mental health issues, learning disabilities, etc. So right across the age range. We are responsible for children's care and support services. In the main, that's children and young people from 0 to 18, but for those with additional need, we do commission services up to the age of 25. We also are responsible for a range of early intervention and prevention services. So these are services that help people to remain independent for longer, and perhaps prevent the need for them to progress into longer term care options. We have a range of community-based commissions within the community, and we are also responsible for the contract management and support of contracts once commissions are let, and also importantly for the quality assurance of the placement. So it's really important that we keep an eye on all of our services and ensure that quality is safe, effective and well led, and actually enables people to meet outcomes during their placements. The quality assurance team does go out to our provider settings, both in the adults and the children's arena, and we have a very robust quality assurance process. All Age Commissioning is also the lead on a range of strategies and a range of strategy work, and the reason for this is that our strategies can underpin all of the commissions that we do, and ensure that we are commissioning the right services to meet need, and we are leading on a range of those strategies, and a number of those are in development. We do also have a statutory responsibility to make sure we have a market position statement, and that this is published and updated on a regular basis. And the market position statement sets out the demand and need within our council, and also our commissioning intentions. At the heart of all of our delivery across all age commissioning should be the people who receive our services, and therefore in commissioning, co-production is really important to us, and making sure that we have a good approach to co-production across our stakeholders, our providers and the people who receive our services that we commission. So co-production is an area that we are working on as part of the transformation strategy as well, to ensure that we develop our practice in this area. There are some excellent examples of how we co-produce services with people and with our providers and stakeholders, but there is more we can do on that journey to make sure that our commissions are informed by those with lived experience. One of the key areas that we've been working on over the last few months is linked to the Children's Improvement Plan, and that's the sufficiency strategy. So some of you may already have been briefed on the sufficiency strategy, which is being launched this month in September, which sets out our intentions around ensuring we have sufficient placements for those children in the care of the local authority. It's a really busy team, and as mentioned by Hilary, the transformation plan is a large undertaking. Some of the key areas that the commissioning team are responsible for within the transformation plan include reviewing the urgent care options and the discharge to assess pathways and how we commission services for those people needing to leave hospital. Our working age adults. So we do have quite a large population of working age adults with needs either from enduring mental health or learning disabilities. And we are currently undertaking a complete review of our community activities. That might be activities for people in the community during the daytime, the evening or at weekends, to allow people to develop their independence and achieve their outcomes. And we're also taking a significant review of the supported living arrangements and the networks that we have within Herefordshire for our supported living. Some of these properties will have been commissioned a long time ago and have been in place for a long time, and we're really mindful that we need to review what we've got in Herefordshire, but also to get on the front foot of planning for the future, as we've already mentioned about how we prepare for the demand that will be coming through in the next 3, 5 and 10 years, and ensuring that we have appropriate models of supported living in place for the future. As another significant area is our home care market, and I think Hilary's just touched on the challenges we have in our home care market. We know that Herefordshire is a very rural county. We have some sparsely populated areas. Getting care out to people in their own homes can sometimes be challenging. Nationally, there is a workforce crisis within care, and it's been difficult to recruit, for providers to recruit to domiciliary care work. So we were starting to work with our providers to look at different ways of commissioning, but we're also starting to look at new models of care, working with other local authorities to look at how we can develop alternatives to the traditional domiciliary care model, such as developing personal assistant markets, and also looking at small micro enterprises within community settings. So a significant piece of that work for us there going forward. We do have 2 strategic contracts, large contracts, which I'm sure some of you will be aware of. That's our arrangements with Hoople for the Hoople Care Services and our arrangements with Shaw. We are reviewing these contracts to make sure that we get the best and most efficient services, and that we also review services to ensure they meet need and demand as it comes through. And one of the areas that's a key challenge is respite, and ensuring we have enough respite support for people in the right places at the right time. And that could help us with preventing things like carer breakdown and people escalating into more residential settings and higher cost elements of care. We are also working significantly with our colleagues in the Children's Directorate around the improvement plan and all of the commissioning outcomes that relate to the improvement plan. I've mentioned the sufficiency strategy, but we are also exploring the options for a more locally based residential option for children's residential facilities. And we're currently working on the detail of that, briefing CLT tomorrow and political group consultation last week around the options for increasing the sufficiency locally for children's placements. Significant amount of work also around how we support 16+ young people in supported accommodation, whether that's 16+ young people at risk of homelessness or those that are have been a looked after child and are moving towards 18 and independence, and how we support young people to prepare for adulthood in that way. Significant amount of work also with our education and SEND colleagues around SEND placements and alternative provision. One of the things the council is experiencing is that the number of children excluded from education is rising, and it is also rising for the first time in primary school education. So we're working on alternative provision options. And then a significant area in terms of our children with special educational needs is our short breaks offer and ensuring that we have enough activities and overnight provision to meet demand in that area. In both our adults and children's areas, we also have regional connections and regional forums, and we work very closely with local authority partners through our regional arrangements also to ensure that we are demonstrating good practice in our commissioning and learning from each other across local authorities.
Hey, could I just ask you something, please?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, you've actually met the challenge. This council now has got a no acronym policy, I believe, and I've already been pulled up about my B2A faux pas, but you did qualify that, and then I was thinking, send, now we need to make sure we all understand. Yes, you did say it, so I'm just trying to make us all aware that if we are using acronyms, we either explain it or document it so that everybody can see it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Crockett. Yes, SEND is special educational needs and disability. Apologies. And then a range of community services that we work around commissioning, etc. And we're working closely with Lee's team around embedding technology enabled care throughout commissions, looking at our all age offer for carers. So that's unpaid carers, people who have a caring role at home. We have a range of domestic abuse services and accommodation that we commission and lead on in terms of strategy development. Mental health areas, a range of services, refugee and asylum seeking services, and a number of other housing related support service commissions. So in terms of how we do the work, some of you may well be familiar with the commissioning cycle, but in Herefordshire Council, the commissioning team are responsible for all aspects of the commissioning cycle. And where we have been working significantly over the last few months is ensuring that we start to commission from a very early stage. So we don't wait till near the end of the contract date. We commission from a very early stage, allowing us to analyse and review all elements. So it's important to say that the all age commissioning team cannot work in isolation. We dovetail into all of the service areas within community wellbeing and also within Children's Directorate to make sure we are capturing need, identifying how we can meet need, developing the relevant options appraisal, developing the commissioning plan, ensuring governance and procurement in line with our legislation, undertaking that procurement process, and then moving to contract award. But also important to say that commissioning does not cease once we've awarded a contract. We have an ongoing duty to manage and influence the market, to develop the market, and to continue to meet need. So taking all of the data, the population health needs, etc., and informing that ongoing relationship with the market, and then the formal contract management arrangements in terms of holding providers to account. So very quick whistle stop of the commissioning cycle, but this is the area that we are responsible for all of that. And as I said earlier, right at the heart of that should be the people who are using our services and influencing each element of the commissioning cycle through our co-production plans. We've mentioned earlier in the meeting around need and how we address need and what we might do to help manage the demand for services. So across Herefordshire Council, across all services, we are seeing demand increase, which is one of the challenges. And we are also seeing to some degree in some services an increase in the acuity of need. So people presenting at a later stage with higher needs, and that may be because there's been delays in medical treatment that they've been waiting for, or they've deteriorated for a number of reasons. So this diagram aims to just demonstrate where we are focusing some of our commissioning effort to help manage the demand for services. So at the bottom of the triangle, we would have our community wellbeing offer. This is our universal services. It might be the talk community offer or signposting people to voluntary sector services, locally based community services, etc. And that would be open to everybody. In the middle of the triangle, you would have the services that should be available to some. So some people would then start to develop need, start to develop eligibility under our legislation. And this is where we would look to place our early intervention and prevention services. These would be aiming to keep people at home and independent for longer without the need to access more longer term options. So these services might be things like provision of community equipment to enable people to remain independent. It might be short break activities for children with special educational needs and disability to enable their needs to be met at home with some interventions and breaks. And then at the top of the triangle, you would have the few from the population, those people who have further need, and we would be looking at our longer term and care and support options there, such as residential placements. So in terms of our opportunities and challenges, our opportunities, we have got some local government association support to review the commissioning team structure, and this links very closely to one of the challenges for the commissioning team, which is the capacity and structure of the team. The all-age commissioning service was restructured in October last year. Since then, we've done lots of work on the commissioning approach within Herefordshire Council, and also in looking at all of the areas where we can add value as commissioners and where we can do things differently to support the challenges of the local authority as a whole, but also to ensure that we meet need and manage the demand for services. And that means that we've identified a number of areas where we need additional capacity potentially to move some of those areas forward. And I'm pleased to say we've secured some local government association support at no cost to us to review the commissioning team structure and make some recommendations on how we can continue to work efficiently, what we might do differently, and what we might need to consider for the structure. We have been working really hard on our relationships with all partners, that's both internally and externally, and I'm pleased to say that over the last 6 months we've developed some really robust relationships within our market, our provider market, and also within our internal colleagues in terms of developing commissioning practice. We continue to strengthen our co-production opportunities across all sectors, and that's very much linked to the development of the community paradigm approach. As part of the transformation plan, commissioners will be embedded in the development of the community paradigm approach, working across Herefordshire. The transformation plan offers us a range of opportunities to do things differently and think about how we commission services, meet need. Lots of work going on around digitally enabled care and how we might transform some of our services with digital enabled care. I've mentioned our regional relationships, but we continue to develop those and move forward, and that brings a lot of knowledge and expertise to us through those forums. We continue to work with our legal teams as well to look at how we increase flexibility within our contracts, how we commission differently. We know sometimes that our traditional procurement approaches are challenging for smaller providers and difficult for smaller providers to access. And we also know that sometimes we want to test pilot models, and our procurement regulations can sometimes be restrictive in relation to that. So we continue to work with legal and procurement about how we can build flexibility within our contracts to allow for innovation for the future. And we have an opportunity as we recommission services to really focus on the outcomes for people and quality measures, all within aspects of value for money. In terms of our challenges, increased demand, as I've mentioned, across all service areas, and increased acuity continue to be challenges, and we work collectively with our social care teams on how we manage that. But in addition to that, we have our rural challenge. So as I've mentioned, sparsely populated areas mean it's sometimes difficult to get care out to people in those areas, and new models are needed, which we're looking at and hope to pilot soon. And then within our provider market, both across children's and adults, there remains a very fragile state in relation to particularly workforce and workforce retention and recruitment. This is a national issue, and we have been working with providers to do everything we can to try and encourage people to apply for jobs within the care sector. And then providers have a range of mechanisms to try and retain carers, but this is a recruitment issue across children's and adults, which remains challenging. Also, that's linked to the issues with the market in terms of challenges is the size of our business. Whilst Herefordshire is quite a large geographic area, the size of our business, given that we're a small population, is not always attractive to providers. This means we can't always attract new providers into the marketplace, but we are doing increased market engagement activities to try and bolster that. In particular, we know in Herefordshire that both in children's and adults, we have challenges in the market around specialist provision. So for those children and adults with increased complex need, we know that we don't have sufficient in-borough, in-council providers who are able to meet those needs. And that means that sometimes we have to place children and adults outside of the county in order to meet their needs. And as has already been mentioned, we do have a large self-funder market. As Hillary's already outlined in mandate, we are trying to understand better the self-funders out there. And for care homes, we do have some of that information, but as mentioned, it's more challenging to understand what that picture looks like for those that are receiving care in their own home and paying for that. But that is a significant challenge for us. In terms of our providers, that also gives us some financial challenges because it becomes difficult to influence and manage the market in relation to fees, because the care providers set their own rate with individual self-funders, and that is an agreement between the self-funder and the provider, of which the council's not involved in. So we know that they are charging higher rates, which means that they are less likely to want to accept council rates. So it gives us a challenge in managing costs with the market as well. Thank you. Has anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Hayley. I guess just before we move on, I'd just like to acknowledge your mention of the LGA, because I think any input that we get from them is really welcomed. Councillor Bartlett, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, it might well be working backwards, but just while we're on this page, one of the opportunities there, you've got development of the community paradigm approach, which I understand is actually coming up at the next partnership meeting workshop. So can you give a quick overview for those that don't know very much about it, what the community paradigm approach is and why it's an opportunity?
Yeah, this is an opportunity. So I'll give it I'll give an overview from my perspective, and then I don't know if Hilary and Christine might want to add to that. But the community paradigm from a commissioning perspective is a really, really good opportunity for us. The community paradigm is about how we as an organisation work better with both our voluntary, community and faith sectors, our other service areas and other providers within the council, to ensure that shift of power, really, that left shift to back to communities. So this is about getting in at the earliest opportunity, being able to look at how services are developed from the earliest opportunity, everybody working together to achieve outcomes. But also from a commissioning perspective, it moves money into a different pot, if you like, for want of a better word, but a different way of commissioning, so that we can perhaps be more flexible and innovative in our approach to commissioning smaller organisations to deliver directly into our communities from that early intervention and prevention focus.
Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, the one thing I want to sort of question you all, sending children out of the county for a specialist, I can't imagine that there can be virtually anything that people in this county can't provide. This is a big thing. I get a lot in my sort of independent emails, non-council emails about children's services and the fact that we have so many children out of the county, and I'm extremely concerned about it. We've heard several meetings now, and really nothing seems to be done about it. And can you explain to me what sort of the services we need that cannot be provided by some organisation within the county?
Yeah, so
Councillor Thomas, I do believe at this point the local authority is continuing to look at our own investment into care facilities for adults and for children. So that is definitely on the agenda. I'm sure Hayley wanted to add something.
Yeah, definitely. Both of those things are on the agenda. Councillor Crockett, and we did have the political group consultation on the residential option for children's last week. In terms of out of council placements, there are a number of things there. So first of all, to say that there are a number of things being done in relation to that to try and address that and ensure that we have more placements on a local basis for the children who need them. So part of that is the development of the sufficiency strategy, which will be published this month and identifies and sets out a number of actions that need to be undertaken to increase sufficiency within the council areas in terms of the types of provision that we require. The second element is that we are continuing to undertake significant market engagement across those children's providers. And the reason for that is because nationally, that you may be aware that nationally there is an increase in the number of children that are looked after by local authorities. And we are seeing increased demand for placements across all areas. So some local authorities are paying significantly higher prices to secure the placement. So it does mean that at the moment it is a seller's market and the provider has the final say in terms of which placements they accept to the home. But we are continuing to work with our market to ensure that Herefordshire Council becomes a referrer of choice to our local market. And then the next steps with that are also talking to our providers about the types of placement that are required and how we encourage providers, if they don't currently offer that type of placement, how we could encourage providers to develop their offer within the local footprint, so as we can increase the sufficiency on a local basis for children and young people that need those placements.
Councillor Thomas, does that not satisfy your question?
No, I'm sorry, this has become, I understand that we have a lot of children from other counties in care in Herefordshire with companies in Herefordshire, and we have an awful lot of children from Herefordshire in other counties with other carers. Well, there's a lot that, this seems to me to be very, very wrong, and I think it needs to be, there's something seriously gone wrong in the past that we have this situation. I do appreciate that certain children have to be homed outside the county for pure personal safety reasons. I accept that, and I'm told that figure's sort of around 40 mark. But we have got an enormous amount of children out of the county, which is causing us a huge upset to their parents, their relations, and a huge amount of extra cost. I don't see anything in the 4 months now that I've been a councillor there's a great deal actually being done. Now, you probably doing a lot we don't see, but we really do need to see some evidence of that this is being sorted and fairly soon, because otherwise we're never going to get out of this problem that we're in.
Okay, I understand that our scrutiny officer would like to add something now.
If I might, I think this is a perennial topic for scrutiny across local authorities, and I just want to assure the members here, well, two things. One, you're absolutely right, this is a serious issue. Secondly, it is one that is depressingly common across the rest of the United Kingdom as well, and I think the officers here put quite the gloss on it, and they actually, and are very modest in terms of detailing the absolute bun fight it can be to find placements for children. It's called a seller's market, is putting it mildly. So I would suggest, I think you raise very valid questions, Councillor Thomas, and I think these might be questions that you as a committee might want to look at in more depth, or you might want to ask the Children and Young People Committee whether they want to look at it in greater depth going forward. Might I sort of suggest that you keep this in mind for the work programme discussion later?
Councillor Tillett, you wanted to add something?
Yes, please. Hayley, this is more of a question of strengthening your arm than a question. Not I'm suggesting that your arm needs strengthening, but in the previous 4 years of the last council, this committee probably had its finest scrutiny session during lockdown, when a meeting that was held over Zoom, and that may have partly contributed to why it was so valuable, looked at the issue that you mentioned about looking at flexibility within contracts. And we had online a number of proprietors, owners, call them what you will, of small care companies who provide carers for the council. And I mentioned that it was on Zoom because maybe the lack of being physically present in the room with the rest of us sort of strengthened their arm and made them talk very openly and very frankly about the difficulties that they face. And it was incredibly useful, and it felt very real to hear the problems that the coalface that they deal with on a day-to-day basis in terms of dealing with the council. But the overriding impression, of course, was their absolute commitment and passion, both of the proprietors and of their carers, to doing the work. But the difficulties that they sometimes faced with the constrictures and the conditions that we as a council place on them. One sticks in my mind in particular, where a city-based provider was told that unless they found a way of providing care for an individual who lived in a village halfway to Ledbury and accommodated that within the same time limits and expenditure and expense allowances as their city-based clients, they would be in risk of losing their contract. Now, that's in the past, and I'm not saying that happens now, but I really think I'm just contributing this for your information as relatively new to the council, and just to say, you know, these people are out there, they really do want to carry on working for us, they care passionately about their clients, and really I would encourage you to look in as flexible a way as possible to make sure that we keep those people. They face dreadful problems in terms of staff retention and recruitment, and we must really try and do everything we can to help them do that. Thanks, Hayley.
Thank you. Yeah, completely agree. We've been meeting with our providers regularly around some of those challenges, and we've also been contacting some of the providers who are not currently contracted with us to understand what their barriers are to contracting with the council to offer some of those services. So we keep that conversation going, and also with our legal and procurement about increasing the flexibility and looking at the geographic boundaries within some of our contracts to help us with that. But thank you, yeah, completely agree.
Thank you. Any other committee questions? Any other questions from anybody on Zoom land? No, I can't see any hands. Okay, Hilary.
The next one is public health. So it should be Matt, who I think is online.
Yeah, thank you, Hilary, and afternoon, everybody. Apologies, I can't be with you this afternoon. So just a few slides, really, to give you a bit of an outline. My name is Matt Pearce. I'm the Director of Public Health. I did an all-induction member session last week, and I've got a more comprehensive slide set, which I need to send out following that event. So I'm happy to send that out for members of the committee to have a look at too. This first slide just really gives a bit of an overview of what we do in public health. So just a plan on a page, if you like. I'm not going to go through the first two rows, but very much really about the functions of the team. But we are here to provide good health and wellbeing for in Herefordshire, and public health came across to local authorities in 2012 as part of the Health and Social Care Act. So prior to that, it was part of the Primary Care Trust. But in my view, that was a really good move for public health, because I think that's where public health belongs. And it provides a real rich opportunity to influence health and wellbeing and the wider factors that shape our lives, which the local government and council have many opportunities to do. So I'll just take you through the functions one by one. As I said, this is a very, very high level summary, but happy to take questions. The first one is about system leadership with public health. And this is quite a hidden skill set, if you like, but it's very much about how public health works in the background to work across organisational boundaries. So we very much talk about places, how we work with organisations, with our partners to actually deliver change on the ground and providing that strategic support. So there's lots of examples that we do around system leadership. One is around how we embed health inequalities across all that we do in the council and our local partners. So some of you may be aware that people in the more affluent areas of Herefordshire live between 4 to 5 years longer than those in the poor areas. So how can we actually embed health inequalities across all that we do? Other things that we do as part of our system leadership as well, we actually have a mandated duty to provide expertise and insight into the NHS. How do we inform NHS commissioning? How do we work with NHS to actually shift resources upstream using the evidence available to us and targeting on the outcomes that we need to improve? So system leadership is quite a bit of a jargon word, but it's actually really important in bringing people together towards kind of shared ownership of our priorities. Health in all policies is something I'm really passionate about. I talked about earlier about how many of the things that shape our health and well-being fall outside of the NHS. So we know from some of the data that the NHS contributes about 20% towards our overall life outcomes in terms of how long we live and how well we live, and that actually 80% of things such as housing, employment, access to green space, education, those things are really important and actually play a really fundamental role in how we shape our lives and live our lives. So health in the policies is very much where public health team work across the whole of the local authority, and that's something I'm really passionate about, to make sure that actually we add the public health approach, if you like, to initiatives. So some examples of that is how we work as part of the big economic plan, for example. I often talk about there's no wealth without health. So we're not going to have a wealthy society, a productive society, if we're not very healthy. And it's really important that we look after the well-being of staff and the adult working population across the county. Other things we're doing around health and policies is around health impact assessment. So how can we actually work with new development sites in terms of housing sites to ensure that they're actually built in a sustainable way that promotes good, healthy behaviours. And that's something we're working very closely with our planning teams. We also do lots of work around sustainable transport initiatives, active travel, 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, as well as working with environmental health on things such as regulation and tobacco and those sort of things. The other part that we do is around evidence-informed commissioning. Again, this is very much where where public health look at the evidence. Hilary talked about the joint strategic needs assessment earlier and understanding Herefordshire. So do we really understand the needs of our local population? And that can inform both the commissioning that Hayley was talking about as well. Do we understanding where the needs are, where the demands are, actually future-proofing our services as well? So what does the demographic of Herefordshire look like over the next 10, 15, 20 years? Where are those needs, and how can we commission and support our communities to address those needs in the most effective way? I think there's lots more work we can be done in that area. And one of the things Hilary mentioned about is a joint strategic needs assessment review, which the Health and Wellbeing Board are doing. So actually, how can we use data in a better way? How do members access it? How do communities access data to help make informed decisions? Public Health also commission a range of different services. And again, many of the services are in Public Health. We have mandated and statutory functions. So we are mandated to provide substance misuse services. So Turning Point, our drugs and alcohol provider, support people with substance misuse issues. And we also commission public health nursing service. So that's health visiting and school nursing. That makes up about a quarter of our overall budget for public health. But that's really important in terms of life chances and getting the best start in life. The other big contract that we commission is sexual health services, whether that's emergency contraception, sexually transmitted diseases and screening for those, amongst a wide range of health promoting and good sexual health practices that we do across all ages. And then finally, the other service we commission is NHS health checks. So that's where we screen adults between the ages of 40 and 74 for potential cardiovascular risk factors. The final one on the far right hand side is preparing and responding to emergencies and protecting people from harm. So emergency planning also sits within public health. So we have our civil contingency duties that we need to fulfil in terms of planning and preparing for emergencies, whether that's business continuity within the council, working with a wider council. And I also chair something called the Local Resilience Health Partnership, which straddles Worcestershire and Herefordshire in making sure that all our NHS trusts are prepared for emergencies, of which we've experienced many of late. At the bottom left of that diagram just talks about some of those statutory responsibilities that we have to deliver as part of the public health team. We are fortunate to still have a ring-fence grant for the council, so we receive about £10 million from government for what we have to spend on public health outcomes. And there's certain conditions attached to that and the statutory responsibility. There's just a few of those listed there. In terms of the 23-24 priorities, we have a health inequality strategy that we need to deliver with partners. Again, a really important strategy. That's not easy. There's lots of complexity in terms of why some people die earlier than others, but it's something that we all want to achieve together across the Health and Wellbeing Board and with our partners. I've mentioned the joint strategic needs assessment review, so really understanding and having up-to-date data to understand where our needs of our communities are, and also monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of our services is really important. Are we really commissioning evidence-based things that work and have a good evidence base behind them? We've got big commissioning contracts at the moment, so sexual health we're recommissioning, public health nursing contract and NHS health checks. So those three are all being commissioned this year with new contracts due to commence April next year. And we're also looking to do a big push around physical activity strategy implementation, particularly around falls. We talked a bit about demand management and adult social care, but there's a really great wealth of evidence around increasing people's activity levels right up to older age, and that can have a significant impact on demand management. So that's something we really want to give a big focus on. Finally, on the right-hand side, implementing the national drug strategy, we're receiving quite significant sums of funding from the council, which is from the government, which is really welcome, around rough sleeping and increasing the number of adults that can access our treatment services, and we're seeing some really positive results as a result of that. And I won't go into a huge amount of detail around the integrated care system, but this is the NHS system that straddles both Herefordshire and Worcestershire with the Integrated Care Board, and we do a lot of work with them in terms of how we focus their commissioning to make sure that's evidence-based and effective, as well as supporting demand management, adult social care and children's social care too. In April, we published our joint health and wellbeing strategy. So that was a really good milestone for Herefordshire. And we had two priorities within that strategy. We had best start in life, and we also had good mental wellbeing. We really wanted to focus on two things as a board. And those two things were well supported, but also the community felt that those were really important to them too. So at the moment, we're developing our delivery plans for those two priority areas, and we're hoping to get those signed off towards the end of the year. And then finally, we're just looking at the public health grant review. So just making sure that the public health grant is being used in the right way in accordance with its conditions. Next slide, please, Tony. I won't go into any huge amount of detail on this, but I just wanted to really highlight some areas where Herefordshire doesn't do very well, and it's always negative when public health talk about this. I must emphasise the point, there's lots of fantastic things going on across Herefordshire, but it's obviously within our gift and within our duty to look at those areas where maybe we're not performing very well. So at a population level, this is some of the data where it's telling us we're not benchmarking particularly well. Smoking status at time of delivery is one that we haven't been performing on, but I'm actually pleased to say we are making some good progress on that. And I think we had 14% of mothers with a recording status of smoking at time of delivery. It was 14% a few years ago, and that's coming down to 8%. So actually probably now in line with the national average. That's really good news. There's some concern around mental health, which I'm sure isn't a surprise to many of you, and that's obviously informed our priorities within the health and wellbeing strategy. Infant mortality rate is one area that does concern me a little bit. While it's small numbers, clearly it's an area of concern, and that's where children die before the age of 12 months. So again, that's something we want to focus on at Health and Wellbeing Board. And I know child tooth decay at the age of 5 is been a challenge for Herefordshire for some time. And then finally, just childhood obesity is another one that's been flagged, and I know this committee has talked about previously. So those are just some of the key challenges we're facing in Herefordshire. But I think sometimes we need to remember there's lots of hidden challenges. So whilst we might be green nationally, there's still big challenges to face around inactivity levels, adult obesity levels, number of people with multiple long-term conditions, and ageing demographic with complexity. Okay, Haley, one final slide, please. So I've tried to keep this quite brief, really. I think the opportunities at public health at the moment is how can we ensure more effective place-based governance? So one of the things I've been keen to do is really making sure we have good governance in place around the Health and Wellbeing Board, but also our partnership boards as well. I think there's lots of different meetings, and it's really being clear on how the role of those different groups, what are they there to achieve, and what's the added value. So I think there's a real opportunity for public health to help facilitate that. Herefordshire isn't a huge local authority, so it's making the best use of our resources to enable that. I've talked about the recommissioning of our public health services. That presents numerous opportunities about engaging more with partners, efficiencies, improving outcomes. I've talked about the JSNA, about how we really want to utilise that, not just within public health, but actually really drive forward decision-making across the whole of the local authority, and that links to the council's transformation programme called Thrive. I think we're really fortunate in Herefordshire to have Taurus, a GP federation that works closely with our GPs through our primary care networks, and some fantastic work that Mandy and her team are doing with them as well. I think there's more we can do around those community signposting roles, linking to the community paradigm approach we talked about earlier, as well as working closely with the voluntary and community sector. Health and all policies I've talked about, plenty more to do there. And then finally, again, just working more closely with the NHS. We have a fantastic relationship with the NHS, but there's more we can do to really get them around the table as equal partners and recognise that health actually, a majority of it sits outside the NHS, but equally recognising that the NHS is a great institution that provides some magnificent services to our population. Finally, for the challenges, and it would be a miss for me as a director of public health not to say this one, but I think the inability for system to shift resources toward prevention. So we talk about this far too often, don't we? How can we really focus upstream? How can we shift those resources to prevention? We know it makes monetary sense. It makes sense for outcomes, but how can we really do that collectively as a system? And I think there's more we can do around inequalities. Are we really focusing on inequalities? Are we really targeting the seldom heard, the unregistered population, those people that are disproportionately impacted and that have been impacted as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? And then finally, the health and wellbeing strategy, best start in life and good mental wellbeing. There's a real opportunity. I just noticed that I missed out health protection as one of my functions. Apologies for that. But the team also do health protection, so around infectious diseases, how did that go amiss when we talked about COVID-19 for so long? But that's also a key part of my team to help keep people safe around infectious diseases. Thank you very much. I'll be taking any questions.
Thank you, Matt. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for last week's introductory briefing for all members. It was most welcome. And just for committee's reference, Matt has got a very small team, possibly a very small budget, but a very big agenda. So, you know, we really have to try and support him and his team. You know, the commissioning projects that are coming up, I think, are really interesting, and I think all committee members should have a quick look at those, and even go and test the services out. I've been a secret shopper myself. I've tested out our sexual health service, so much so that they know who I am now, so it's not so secret. Yeah, and what I keep asking about, but you know, we have to test our services. Matt nearly got away without an acronym, but the JSNA slipped in there. He did say it in full, absolutely. And it's a really interesting document that I would recommend to all committee members. So much so that Daniel's been on the case and has forwarded it to everybody. So,
But not quite sure. It's on your Teams group. If you look under files there, you'll find JSNA there, along with the Integrated Health Board, Partnership Assemblies strategy as well.
He's keeping us up to date with everything, but thank you, Matt. Any questions from committee members? Councillor Bartlett.
Thanks, and thanks for that, Matt. I just wanted to ask one question, really, about the health checks and the how widely they've been taken up, but also for the providers. Is it a standard?
Is it sorry, was the last bit of your question? Is it a
Sorry,
standard?
I'm having problems with my microphone.
Oh, okay.
Bear with, I've been offered another one. That actually got a button on it. Yeah, so the health checks that we're doing, the providers, is it a standard health check? And every provider does the same check? And also, just how much is it being taken up by people that are being offered these checks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I won't have that exact data to hand, but for your first part of your question, so the NHS health checks is a mandated requirement of us in public health. So we should invite 20% of the eligible population to an NHS health check every year. So everyone should get invited to a health check every 5 years, really, between the ages of 40 and 74. So between the ages of 40 and 74, we should at least offer a health check over that 5-year period to everyone. It's one of those areas we're not performing particularly well, although I'm pleased to say we are seeing an improvement in that performance. I haven't got the data to hand at the moment. It varies. I mean, sometimes if you offer an invite to somebody, that in itself won't encourage them to take it. And I think one of my challenges to the team that has been, and some of the criticisms of that programme, is it's often the worried well that only take up that offer, rather than those that really need it. So I think, you know, sometimes you can maybe invite, you know, of the 80% that you might invited, only maybe 5 to 10% actually take it up. So there's an argument, actually, we need to make it really targeted. And sometimes I'd rather we actually focus on those that really need it than actually invite the worried well to take that up, because we know those will probably benefit the greatest. But I can certainly bring that data back to the committee or follow up after, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would, because this is talking about secret shopper. I fairly recently had mine, and it did feel very much like, gosh, we haven't seen you for ages, come and have a check. And I felt it was it was driven by the amount of time that they hadn't seen me, rather than whether or not they felt that I needed to be seen. But also, in terms of the standardisation of the check, because I kind of got the feelings from talking to some of my other people that I know that have also taken up health checks at different surgeries to my own. I felt that they were being maybe offered different things like bloods and what have you, rather than a very very short check that very minimal check that I got, and I wondered if there is a standardisation. And for two reasons, because then what is the general data of how people are ageing well, if we've got their records over however many years? And is it quantitative or qualitative if people are being asked different questions or being checked for different things?
Yeah, so the NHS health checks are generally quite standardised. What they do is they go through a series of risk factors. Do you smoke? Family history of heart disease? Take your blood pressure and things like that. They're quite standard. That goes into an algorithm that then gives a potential risk score of cardiovascular disease. Pending on that, then that might prompt further investigations by the GP practice. So they might take your bloods, etc. So very much it's a kind of it depends on that kind of algorithm, if you want, in terms of the process. But the core questions that within the health check, they're relatively standardised.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know Councillor Dykes works in this healthy industry, so he might want to make a comment in a minute, but I think Councillor Tillett wanted to add something at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Matt. As you know, I represent some of the poorest people in the county, indeed even in the country, so no surprises that the health inequality topic is high on my agenda as well. Within that,
Somebody's ringing you.
Somebody's ringing somebody. Within that, Matt, you know, what's top of your shopping list really in terms of addressing the health inequality problems for those in the poorest areas in the county?
Question. I think mental well-being is really important in terms of tackling health inequalities. I think mental health doesn't get given due attention in terms of, you know, you don't really have good physical health without good mental health. I think there's a real opportunity through the community paradigm and other work streams around tackling health inequalities and doing some community-based work with full community as well. Actually, how do we get to understand those needs of those communities better and what's really facing those communities? Many of those communities you're talking about, I don't want to generalise, they probably don't want to turn up for an NHS health check. They've probably got a whole host of issues facing them, whether that's employment, financial distress, fear of crime, safety, any of those kind of things. So for me, I think it's mental well-being of the general population, and we know we have to offer universal services. Just focusing on the neediest won't work. It has to be a combination of both. But I think how we support people with their mental well-being, particularly following the pandemic, particularly with the cost of living crisis, I think that's really important. And that plays itself into employment, physical activity, all those kind of all works within one, if that makes sense.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Dykes, did you want to add anything?
I'm just surprised that with such an important topic and issue that you have got one of the smallest teams, and your funding doesn't seem to be sufficient. Perhaps we can look at that. I don't know. I'd get a bigger team for you. Be great. I work for a Halo Leisure within Herefordshire, and the centre I actually work at, we have quite a number of NHS employees coming in to deliver everything from falls prevention to Parkinson's talks. We do an awful lot of referrals through Halo and just for the whole of Herefordshire. So I think that's a really positive move. And over the summer we did, and you talk about early intervention, we did a teen fit hit. So it's £30 for 6 weeks, where they could, youngsters between the age of year 7, which is 11-year-olds, I believe, up to 16 can come use at gyms and pools at any time. So that's all really positive stuff. But I think that was a Halo initiative. But what I've seen at our centres and the work that I do, we do an awful lot, and the NHS are actually doing an awful lot for the general public within Herefordshire, in my view, and all the facilities that we provide through the NHS. They've taken over virtually every spare space in our our facility, we've got storerooms a lot. Yeah, so, no, good effort.
Thank you, Councillor Dykes. I think it just shows what working can do, so I don't think there are any other questions in the room. I'd just like to again thank you, Matt. As always, we appreciate your hard work, and wouldn't it be great if you could have more money, but I don't think that's going to happen in the near future, but keep up the good work. Thank you.
The next area is housing.
Before we
Did you want to
go on to the housing agenda, do we need a break? We're
Good idea.
an hour and a half into the meeting, yeah. So we're going to have a 10-minute adjournment.
Sorry, she's taking longer, Madam Chair.
We're back online.
I'm back online, sorry.
So we've got confirmation that we're back.
We're running, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the meeting following the short adjournment. Hilary, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to move to housing now. So Hayley Crane.
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Councillor Crockett. So I am Hayley Crane. I am the interim head of housing. Members have had some training on housing a couple of months ago. So the slides today are just a quick overview of some of the housing issues. So housing has a number of statutory duties, and to address these, Herefordshire Council has a number of distinct housing teams. So the first housing team that we have is strategic housing. Now, Councillor Thomas, this is the team that you were referring to when you were talking about development and actually negotiating the correct properties. So strategic housing have the responsibility to negotiate and deliver affordable housing through the planning system. So working with identified housing need, the team actually play shape. So when they're negotiating the applications, they put forward the bed size, they put forward the tenure, they put forward the type of accommodation, they put forward the standards, so that we're actually developing affordable housing that is required at the time to meet the housing need. That can be for any client group, it could be general needs, it can be a care home, and any form of accommodation that is required, strategic housing can negotiate through the planning system. As I say, we also play shape, so we also work with planners to shape the market on the open market properties. So there was a period of time where we were getting lots of 4 and 5 bed, big detached executive homes. There has been a shift in that now because affordable housing also comments on that, so you're getting more of the family-sized accommodation coming through. Sitting within strategic housing is also the migration team. So this is a team that supports all of our Ukrainian, Afghan households and asylum seekers. So if you think of strategic housing as the team that deals with properties, we've also got housing solutions. This is the operational team that deal with homelessness, temporary accommodation and outreach support. So again, think of this team that deals with people. That's a good way of splitting between the two teams. Sitting within housing solutions is also HomePoint. Now, we have a statutory duty to provide a waiting list. So we have to have an allocations policy and a waiting list for people to join to be able to bid for housing. That waiting list is held within HomePoint. I think what we need to remember is that housing have all of the statutory duties, but we actually have no powers. So we have to meet all of the duties, but we can't do it on our own. So we do rely heavily on, this is why I had to go through all my acronyms out to make sure I had them sorted. So we do rely on our registered providers. So our registered providers are also known as housing associations or RPs. Now they deliver their own stock. They also take on the properties that are delivered through the planning system. We also work with a voluntary and private sector. So it's important to realise that there is a whole gambit of partners that we work with to secure affordable accommodation. It's also good to note that we are not classed as a stockholding local authority. So just touching on some of the key data. At the moment, we currently have 130 households in temporary accommodation, and we've got 71 households in bed and breakfast or hotels. This isn't just a local issue, this is a national trend now. Numbers are rising, it isn't unique to Hereford, it is a national issue at the moment, and we've got just over 1,900 people on our waiting list. Estimated spend on temporary accommodation this year is about £1 million. To address that, as I mentioned before, strategic housing negotiate the affordable housing. So from the 1st of April this year, 64 affordable properties have been delivered. There's a further 263 of those properties in our pipeline that will be delivered this financial year. We've also got just over 1,000 properties in the 3-year plan. So that means in the next 3.5 years, there'll be just over 1,300 units coming forward for affordable housing. That sounds an awful lot, but if you think about the waiting list of 1,900, you've also got all of the other client groups that don't register onto the waiting list. So you've got learning disabilities or mental health or children's services. You start to get the picture that there are a lot of other households who require accommodation as well. We have been extremely successful of lately. So we have secured just under £4.5 million from DLUC, Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. We rely on them for grant funding. We often match fund it, but we do secure a lot of grant funding to enable us to provide support or additional accommodation. Like I say, we're very good at securing that money. We've got a good reputation with them. At the moment, grant funding that we know finishes in March 25, so we do need to come up with other ways to secure grant funding to move forward. So moving to challenges, sorry, next slide, challenges and opportunities. There are a number of challenges that are presenting at the moment. Demand is without a doubt outweighing the supply of accommodation, and that is due to a number of reasons, primarily the rise in the cost of living. It is having a huge impact along with affordability, especially if you start to look at the private sector. Rents are becoming increasingly unachievable, especially if you've got a household that is reliant on the local housing allowance to purchase that property. LHA is something like £130, private rent is nearly £330. There's a £200 shortfall per week. So you multiply that over a month, that whole household has to find that difference themselves to secure that accommodation, which is why we're seeing more and more people adding themselves to the waiting list. There are also a number of changes in government legislation, especially on the private sector, and this is having a knock-on effect on the private landlords. We are seeing a number who are selling their properties, and that means that they are actually giving their tenants no-fault eviction notice to quit. So it's no fault of the tenant, the landlord just needs to sell that property. They can no longer afford to keep it, or they can no longer afford to make the changes to the property that is required through legislation. So again, that's another group that are presenting themselves as homeless to us. We're also seeing increased interest rates. So again, another pool of people that we wouldn't normally see approaching the council for assistance are actually starting to lose their accommodation because they can't continue with the repayment through interest rates. So again, there's another block of people joining the waiting list, but that has an effect with the housing associations as well. Borrowing of money is not as cheap as it used to, so the housing associations are also pulling back on the borrowing because their capacity is lower. Therefore, they're also not delivering as many affordable units as there have been in the past. So all of this is demand is growing, the amount of accommodation that is coming forward is shrinking. But there are some opportunities. As I say, we've got a really good rapport with DLUC. They are working well with us. they do give us the heads up when there are bidding opportunities coming around. They work very well with us. They help us shape our bids to enable us to get the most from them. And house prices are actually starting to slowly drop. So there is opportunity there for us to work with the housing associations so that we can start to acquire more accommodation. If I just go back to on the 910 capital, so that enables us as a local authority to purchase 10 units. So that accommodation would be for 18 to 25-year-olds, but for young adults who are homeless or at risk of homeless. The focus of most grant funding at the moment is around the homelessness cohort. We work well with our partners. We also work extremely well with our developers, but I think we need to move away from affordable housing being the only option. It isn't the only option. We need to try and encourage people to look at an array of affordable housing options. We also need to try and encourage households that are starting to break down. We're taking a preventative approach, is what I'm trying to say. We're trying to work with those households to stop those families breaking down, enable the families to stay together, because there is just not the accommodation at the moment. If those families present to us, the likelihood is that they will probably have to be based out of county at the moment. And as you say, Councillor Thomas, that is not an ideal situation. We need to try and keep families together. I can talk you through all different aspects of housing, but I think I just wanted to give you the basics today, as you've already had the training, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hayley. I think we all appreciate prevention is better than cure. Any members got any questions? Yeah, Councillor Tillett.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, Hayley, probably, my ward is basically two very large former council housing estates. And even after 20 years, I'm afraid that message of us not being a stockholding authority doesn't get through. Yeah, but it's still council housing, Kev. No, it isn't. It really isn't, and it hasn't been for 20 years. And you're so right about the impact of interest rates on those housing associations, not just in terms of delivery, but also in terms of maintaining those properties. I have a number of properties in the ward which need substantial structural work because they are quite old properties. Many of them are pre-war, and they are remaining void until another budget round for that housing association gives them enough money to actually do the structural work to return it, fit for habitation. But so my question really is, and this is quite a political one, so I'm not expecting a fulsome answer. The last administration, quite rightly in my opinion, did start to talk about the fact that maybe we need to start looking at building and providing our own housing. Go back to a model of having some council housing where we will have that control, which, as you rightly say, we don't have. Obviously, the new administration is still quite new, but I mean, is there any movement in that direction as far as you're concerned?
There are two aspects to that. So there's council housing delivery corporately, and then there's strategic housing. So I'll talk about strategic housing. So that's the team that sits within the housing service. So this is the team that secured the grants and match funds. And so we do bring forward accommodation. So we're not classed as a stockholding local authority because we've got less than 200 units. But we do acquire properties off the open market. We acquire them for supported accommodation. So we have a very specific client group in mind. We work very closely with the housing association. So we purchase those properties, we refurb those properties, we identify the clients, and then we take a full repairing lease with the housing association, so they take those properties from us. They take the risk out of it from us, and they have that property for a period of time. That works extremely well. We still get to nominate the clients into those properties, and the housing association maintain it and do everything else they need to do with that property. That is a possible way forward. The housing associations don't have the grant funding themselves, so there would need to be some money on the local authority to do that. It is something still in the pipeline. There are still a few sites there that we own ourselves or we are looking at, but there would need to be significant funding to be able to do that.
Councillor Tillett. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Thomas.
Can I say on the political front, you know I'm Conservative. I absolutely have always believed in council houses. I grew up with all my friends on an estate which is literally built at the end of the farm. The houses were built really well. It was a hell of a community, and I think we've got to start to look backwards rather than looking to all these bright new ideas. Our forebears, our fathers, our grandfathers have some damn good ideas which worked, and we seem to always be poo-pooing the past as, the past. But the past was successful. I think we need to go backwards. The question I want, one of the things that we've done in planning, we had to deal with an application in St Mary's Village at Ross the other day. Now that is a complete community, building a complete community. It's all been built by various property builders, but it's a community. And it's absolutely brilliant. I don't see any others coming along behind them, and it's still being built. And there are bungalows, there are houses, big houses, little houses, there are all sorts, and already they have got a community, they've got a community committee, and I think we need to be going slightly backward. One of the things I would like to know is what is the budget that the council actually have to purchase houses? Because, obviously if it isn't enough, we as councillors perhaps ought to be thinking of making it bigger.
I don't know if the line's still in the budget. There was 20 million set aside in the last administration for council housing delivery. The problem with the budget is that it has to be repaid, and affordable housing rents are extremely low. So there's not enough return on the rents to pay the interest, to pay those loans back.
Yeah, I take that, but I think you could quite easily have an in-between market on this where people are paying more nearer commercial rates and also people paying subsidised rates where people haven't got enough money and all living side by side. And I think that would work quite well, but I do appreciate that it has to be, at the end of the day, it all that we found from somewhere.
So the development you were talking about in Ross, St Mary's, so that's one of my developments as well. So what's on there is 40% affordable housing of the whole site. Every time as an application comes in, we secure 40%. So that 40% is made up of bungalows, but not just general needs bungalows. We also go for M42, M43, so specific size for physical disabilities. We go for houses, we go for the whole mixture, which is creating that cohesive community, and that's what we try to do on every development.
Good. Do you think, is there anything in the pipeline? Because it's the two of us on this, we're sat on the planning committee, and we both said, we need to start sort of getting a little bit more forceful with planning and making sure that we've got these communities. Is there anything in the pipeline that you know about? Because we don't.
No, so any of the planning applications that come forward, we automatically we're an automatic consultee. So anything over 10 units, I automatically consult on and I will secure the affordable.
Right.
From the council putting schemes forward, there isn't at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. We'll let you take that back to your political.
I think a lot of us think the same, actually.
Good, good. Let's move on. Any other questions from Councillor Gandy? I feel like I've left you out. Is there anything you want to add at this point, or are you happy for us to carry on?
If you carry on, and then I'll speak at the end, okay?
Yeah, perfect, thank you. And Councillor Davis, I don't know whether you wanted to not feel left out.
No, I'm not feeling left out at all. I'm enjoying the conversation.
All right, thank you. Okay, Hilary, should we move on?
Yeah, so the next section is called prevention and support. So that's Lee.
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Chair. I'm Lee Davis, Head of Prevention and Support Services. I wanted to sort of concentrate, I carry responsibility for two broad areas, and within that there are some work streams. So I wanted to really bring your attention to those areas and work streams and the scale of them. And then I wanted on the next slide to talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that exist for those services and for us in making use of those services. So firstly, we start with my responsibility for the independent living service. This is where occupational therapy offer sits, and occupational therapists assess for and prescribe aids and equipment and adaptations. So everything in terms of adaptations from to help people with activities of daily living, helping people get in and out of bed, in and out of a chair, in and out of a bath, or all these sorts of things that help people to live more safely and more independently at home. The adaptations can go from sort of minor adaptations, literally putting a grab rail in to help you get down the stairs or your front steps, to obviously a stair lift, people will be familiar with those, level access shower, right the way through to a full-blown extension to a house under a disabled facility grant. This helps people stay safe and independent in their own homes. It reduces care packages and delays the need for residential care. If the of handling the slides will indulge me, could you take me back to slide 11? Is that possible to do? It's where the triangle was. Sorry, Hayley had it separately, did she? It was Hayley Doyle's slide. Is that possible to show slide 11?
Yeah, I'll go back, Lee. Just bear with me.
Okay, you're in charge, are you, Hayley? Thank you. All right, that's wonderful. Okay, so I mean, I thought councillors might be interested in just where we sit on that triangle. So the community equipment, the OT service, is very much about a service to the son. It's very much about a situation where what we know is if we provide equipment, aids, adaptations, disabled facility grants, we can stop people needing to go into, or delay the need to go into residential care. A disabled facility grant can reduce that for 4 years. So not all of the some will become the few. Not everybody needs to go into residential care, but those that do go into residential care will go much later. And those who do not need to go into residential care will have less intrusive care packages. Because someone coming in your house providing care is intrusive. It's also expensive. It's expensive to you as the person receiving that care and expensive to the council and therefore expensive to the taxpayer. So we're firmly in that middle band on there. Telecare, technology-enabled living, which is also part of the independent living service. And I'm proud to say that the approach that Herefordshire always taken on this is to offer that as a universal offer. So that's not even at the some, that's at the all. Of the people who use what we, at the moment we provide a telecare service, but we're starting to provide a technology-enabled living service, and later on I'll come on to the difference between them. But 65% of the people who have a telecare service from us do not have a care package from us. 65%. Now they may have care packages elsewhere, some of them, but there are also very, very much people who are saying, quite rightly and quite sensibly, and I'm really impressive that people do, I'm getting a little trailer, I'm getting a little wobbler. I haven't fallen over yet, but I might. I haven't really left the cooker or the ring on very much yet without forgetting about it. I have left the tap on a little bit, but I've remembered it. But I'm starting to go that way. So can I have a bit of technology in now to stop that happening in the future? And I think that's a really impressive thing about Herefordshire people, that they're doing that. So that's in place, and we're supporting nearly 2,500 people in Herefordshire that way. which per head of population is one of the best levels across England. Yeah? And just in terms of Sky, if I can leave that for the moment and go back, Hayley, thanks to, I think my slide was number 19. Just to, if that helps, Hayley, can you do that for me? Sorry, to make you work overtime. Done. Thank you, it was done, well done. So just in terms of the scale, because people I think don't always understand the scale of this piece of work, that in 2022-23, the service received and triaged referrals for nearly 3,000 adults with identified needs for occupational support for community equipment, telecare, and those major and minor adaptations, and completed 2,781 reviews of the service provided. So it's a fair old scale. We'll come on later to actually the kind of the financial impact on that. So that's one area, and I'd like to move on a little bit to the other area, which is welfare and financial assessment team, which also encompasses direct payments and welfare benefits advice. So that's a little bit strange, perhaps, to the first. Why is that prevention? Well, I think the view is if you encourage and help people and support people to have the right level of income, that's possibly the first prevention there is. If I've got the right level of money in my pocket to be able to do the things I need to do, isn't that the first prevention action? So it's in there. And what it does is assess the contribution that residents should make to the cost of the services that the council provides under the Care Act to them. Yeah? And it receives and administers the direct payment service, which is part of that, and it provides a small welfare benefits advice service. And again, just on scale, the financial assessment team last year brought in £11.6 million of income to this council, and this year we're expecting it to be over £12 million of income to this council. And the welfare benefits advice service, which is a very small service, for about 2 people, yeah, that welfare benefits advice service generated over £500,000 of extra money to those people who were claiming welfare benefits, of which 90% of that actually comes to the council because it actually helps them to pay for their charge. But it means they get the right level of reports. Can I go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, sticking with the welfare and financial assessment team, we have a charging transformation project underway. One of the issues around the welfare benefits, or the welfare, not the welfare benefits, the welfare financial assessment process we have at the moment, it's quite complex, as you can imagine, it's money. And we have a lot of handovers. So we have things like, first of all, there's the assessment that needs to be undertaken by the social care team. Well, if you're having your needs assessed and you know you're going to have to pay for it, you want to know very quickly, what am I going to be charged for that? Because actually that impacts on whether I need to actually buy it or whether I can really have a nice little word with my daughter and see whether she'll do it too and help a little bit. But you really want to know, don't you? I don't want to start having a care package without knowing how much it's going to cost. So you want to know that quickly. So we need to do that assessment process. We need to make it smooth and easy. People need to present their income to us. And we want to use more portals and self-assessment type processes online, which we started doing that already, but we need to do much more of that so that people can understand this is what it's going to cost me if I need a care package. Then it comes in, and of course you've got the whole administration bit about which you've got people know and tell them what they're getting. You've got the administration bit of actually paying for it, getting the money in. That's colleagues with Hoople. But there's also things like the court of protection team can be involved sometimes in that. There's also things like there's a local welfare aspect to this. And those referrals. And then there's a whole bit about if the money isn't coming in, I'm afraid we also have debt recovery processes. Now that's a whole bunch of different things. So what happens at the moment is there's a lot of handovers between little bits of departments in the council between those. And we're looking through a whole charging transformation project taking place right now. We're done by before the end of the year, promise. Touch wood. Touch me heart, touch me head, touch me wood. That we will get that done, and we'll try and streamline that process so that it is quicker and clearer for the customer, and we actually get that income in that we're entitled to fairly and the right income for people. Yeah, do that properly. So that's a major piece of work that we're doing at the moment. We're also recognising that we have that small welfare benefits team. It's largely put at people where we are now in dispute. Sorry, they are now in dispute with the Department of the DWP, Department of Welfare. Yeah, they're in dispute about the benefits level they've got. So it's at high end very much. So we're not doing quite so much frontline advice. That's there, it's available. But actually, active involvement with cases, there's actually tribunal work from the Department of Work and Pensions, where the Department of Work and Pensions said you should get this much, Our guys have looked and said, no, there should be more than that, and it goes to tribunal, or we support people in terms of that. There's other welfare benefit service going on. You're aware there's the CAB work, the various voluntary entities, HUK, Learning Disability Services are also doing welfare benefit stuff. So we're aware that there's all these little organisations around, not little organisations, all these little pots of work by organisations going on in Herefordshire. But they're not well coordinated and we don't really understand them very well. So we've got a event, a workshop, a big workshop day on October the 17th, just around the corner now, and we've sent out a survey to them. Who do you support? What kind of inquiries do you get, etc., and we're bringing them to this room on October the 17th for a workshop to help understand what they're doing and recognise, can we sort of bring this together and start to understand? Now, we use something called a piece of software called Better Off. You can go through Talk Community and you can access it through there and take a look at it. And it's a calculator that says, oh, this is what my welfare, this is the welfare benefit I should be able to get. This is the money I should have. Now, what we're going to try and do is see whether all the other agencies would be interested in doing that, because we found out that within that piece of software, there's another piece of software that actually helps us then to turn around and say, how many people have we supported? What have they asked for? What are their needs? Who are they? Yeah, who are you supporting? What difference does it make, etc., etc. And we can see what it means for all of Herefordshire in terms of people of Herefordshire. So that's a major piece of work, and again, we want to be able to do to say actually the welfare benefits service across the council, not just by across the council, not just by the council. So I'll go there. If I now take you back to the independent living service, sorry to play tennis with you, although that's very topical at the moment, isn't it? The occupational therapy, the independent living service. The big challenge to us, and Hilary mentioned it right at the start of this afternoon, is recruitment. Recruitment of occupational therapists is a national problem, and in Herefordshire, it's an even more exacerbated national problem. I don't have a single occupational therapist that lives in Herefordshire. They're all around the edge. Yeah. So we've got an extensive backlog of assessments for community equipment and for telecare. So if you remember the figure of 3,000, nearly 3,000 adults that we did attend to in 2022-23, I have a backlog of between 700 and 800 people at the moment, still waiting proper assessment. And that's not that, and that's largely because I cannot recruit. And it's getting better. Now, as at Christmas gone, my level of OT were around about 30% of the amount of people that we've got in on our establishment budget. We pushed that up. We've put a market supplement in, and we're working very closely with health now, because what happens with OTs is they tend to do their training and their development in hospitals, and then they go and do something in community health. So we're saying, come and have a look at social carers, but we've got agreement with that. Come and have a look at social care, you might like it. And that's sort of beginning to make a difference. But our competitors, if you like, for OTs are not other authorities, as I think it is for Mandy in terms of social care. A competitor is health. Yeah, they have slightly better terms and conditions, and you get a nice uniform. So that's the competitor there, but we are making strides, and I've got the right number of OTs now. I've got 5 locums. Locums are expensive. I'm very comfortable with their professional standards because they are duly accredited with the College of Occupational Therapists. So I'm very comfortable with the professional standards. But obviously, they don't know Herefordshire quite so well, and they don't have the level of continuity that an employee will have. Having said that, it's the right number of people, but it's not the right number of whole-time equivalent hours. So I'm still well under. But it does mean we're starting creating that backlog. But what it does mean is that we have to recognise that we do have that backlog, and what are we going to do? And that does mean that we've started a piece of work now that's really looking at OT across the county again. Our colleagues in health and ourselves, and indeed elsewhere, there's little pots of OT being delivered in different places. And we need to understand, I think the public will have trouble knowing, is this a health OT or is this a social care OT? Because they shouldn't really need to worry, should they? But that's one of the issues for them. And when I'm being, as I can be, a little bit controversial, I'm not certain all professionals. I think know that too and get a little bit confused. So we've got to do something about that, and that's one of the things that we're working on very now, to try and actually help people to understand what is the structure of delivery across OT, where do you go to for what, how do we make that seamless and smooth and for all our customers, and also recognising that actually, okay, this backlog, we've got to find a way of doing things differently. because that backlog is not acceptable. So we've got to find a way of doing it differently, and we've got some models that we've literally just started looking at that allows us to do that. So that's a big one for us. The other one is digital technologies, which I mentioned there, and this moved from something called telecare to technology-enabled living. Now this is sorry, Councillor Crockett's smiling because she knows this is a passion of mine. What we have done with telecare historically, and actually we used to sell it this way, was, oh, there's a sensor up in the corner of the room. It sits there quite quietly and does nothing at all. You won't know it's there. And then if something goes wrong, it'll alert somebody and we can sort something out. That's still there. That's right. I call it react and respond. It sits there. Something happens. It reacts. We get a response out. But that's it. It waits for something to go wrong. What we can now do with the people who are familiar with the switch from analog phones to digital phones and the use of digital technology, what we can do now is actually predict and prevent something from happening in the first place. Now, this is all with obviously with the permission of the person themselves, or through a best interest assessment if they have a capacity issue. So, but it means that, for example, and Leslie and I've started to talk about this in terms of talk community involvement. I could go on falls. You all know I was interested in talking about Halo and the work that comes into Halo. Muscle mass and hydration levels are the two big determinants of falls. We can actually measure that. We can measure people's activity levels. We can see that you're moving around less. We can say, your mum's moving around a lot less this week than she was last week. She's not having a cup of tea, she's not drinking. And we can say too, through talk community, to a local community, is there anybody that can pop in and make sense she got a cup of tea? Yeah. So that one of the differences, at the moment, telecare is supporting vulnerable people. Technology-enabled living can support vulnerable people and support the people who support vulnerable people. It can actually engage that community, give them information, give them support so that they can actually offer care to people and prevent things from happening in the first place. This is the big change. And we have a 3-year programme in place, agreed, funded, where we're starting to try that out. We've already got something where people are getting information from as a carer, as a family member, they're getting information on their mobile phone about their mom they're cared for and the activities they're doing. And I know people say to me, well, I go in and see my mom and she was hell today, she was really difficult. And you're able to show, you know what, she's had a really bad night's sleep. And say, oh, well, I can understand why she's hell if she's not sleeping well. And you feel more able to give the care because you understand why mom is difficult. And also we can say, actually, do you know what? Her bad night's sleep, she's had 4 in the last 9 days or nights. It's getting worse. So if something's changed, can you perhaps have a word with the GP, perhaps have a word with the nurse? There's something happening that your mom is not quite where she was. She's not moving around as much as she used to. So that's more likely to fall. She's not drinking. That's more likely to fall. We can even, and it's not pictures, it's not video, but we can even say, you know what, her gait has changed. She's walking differently. And that's likely going to lead to a fall. There's a piece of technology out there that will know that you're going to fall 30 days before you do. It's not, I mean, okay, that all sounds a bit Big Brother, but you think about that, you can actually step in and say, could we actually see if we can do something to change that algorithm, to change that metrics, so that you're actually using your strength more and moving around a bit more. Now, what that means is a major service redesign, and Hilary talked about this. So this 3-year programme has actually a redesign of the way we deliver services, not just as a council, but in partnership with health, in partnership with talk community, partnership with voluntary agencies, and partnership with the community, because that's a service change, and that's the direction of travel we're taking. Yeah, at the end of all this, don't worry about the technology is all there. It's actually redesign the service to say, the support model, yeah, to say, actually, you know, we can help you as the individual. And that information can go wherever. I can control that information so it just comes to me, or I can control that information that it goes to social care, healthcare, the talk community local hub, and I can infinitely change that. I can say, it comes to me, I'm the carer, I'm going away to the Gower Peninsula for a weekend of break, I'd like you to go to the social care team, you know, please, just so I'm back on Monday, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of service model change, service model, is the work that's developing. And if I'm rattling on, hopefully I've given you lots of opportunity to challenge me, give questions and express your worries about what I'm talking about. But those are the 2 big areas for us.
Thank you, Lee, thanks very much. And you know, I've been involved
Yes, you have.
in this area for many years, and I share your frustrations regarding occupational therapists.
Yes.
We're trying to grow our own social workers, so we need to look forward and try and see if we can do anything in that area as well. I do have some reservations about technology. I'm not a technophobe, but I'm trying to accept it. And artificial intelligence, I find a little bit scary sometimes. Although it has really supported my mother living in her own home for longer than she perhaps could have. Right. Councillor Thomas, you would like to ask a question or have a comment?
Well, it's a statement rather than a question. I can't believe I've just sat here for the last 15 minutes. Your enthusiasm is just unbelievable. This is the thing that us guys coming in, we've been used to this in the commercial world, whatever. Yeah. But this is you are somebody who's getting something done. And your enthusiasm, your staff must be over the moon to work with you. And you, because you're doing things, you're not only doing it, you are actually, we all totally understood where you're coming from, what you're doing. I just hope the rest of everybody else in the council takes a lead.
Much appreciated, thank you.
We're going to have to put you in charge of HR.
Oh, yes.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bartlett.
Thanks. Yes, your enthusiasm is really infectious. And actually, Pauline, some of the stuff that you were saying about I suppose it's fear of change, isn't it? Sometimes fear of, as we get older, we tend to give the mobile phone to the next generation to sort it out. And so I guess, so there's a kind of the amount of information that can be collected, so Big Brother is looking after you, could be one aspect of people's fears to manage. But also I was really interested, Leslie, in what Lee was saying about that kind of partnership now that's being forged between you guys. So when we go back to the community paradigm and different ways of trying to commission, and that, so 2 points really. So the ability to maximise the benefit of the money that we keep within the county and spread around, as well as I guess trying not to rely just on goodwill and volunteer work.
No, absolutely.
And there was another point, but I'm getting to the age where I'll have to get back to you on that. Yeah.
I started out as a volunteer in social care, would you believe, long time ago. And you give the almost the same level, well, not quite identical, but you give the same volume of support to a volunteer as you give to a member of staff. I think that's really important. Volunteers will do enormously wonderful things, provided they are given A, support and information, and B, somebody to go to if they have found something they don't know what to do with. I've never seen this before. I need to talk to somebody. I need some help. I don't know what to do on this one. And if they've got somebody then they can ring up or talk to and say, and that's what I mean about the service model redesign. There's a point where we turn around and say, volunteers need to be able someone to say, I don't know, I'm a bit worried about Mrs. James. I have popped in to give her a cup of tea, but I'm a bit worried about her. Can I make contact with somebody? And this is somebody there I can actually talk to, listen to. And volunteers will do enormous things if we can provide that. They will do wonderful things. The other thing we can do, which I skipped, and this is to become proactive in giving out information. This is a simple step now, but it's a simple step, but it's a challenge to Hayley in terms of the commissioning, in my view, in the sense that we can focus information to the people who need information. So we can send to the Stroke Club in Leominster has moved from a Thursday to a Tuesday. That can be sent out through this technology to all people who support people who've had stroke, but not to people who are supporting people with dementia because they don't want to know about it, if you see what I mean. Yeah, and not necessarily to people in Ross who might not want to go to Leamington. I don't know. See what I mean? And we can start to push that information out to people, not only about the person themselves, what sort of good night's sleep your mum had, or whether she's actually been in the kitchen for the last 2 days. You know, we can, not just that, but some information about the community, what's available in the community. You don't have to go to a website and find it and go, which is fine, nothing wrong with websites, but nothing to sort of search it. You can actually sign up to say, these are the parameters for me, and it actually comes out. Marketing do this all the time, don't they? You know, marketing do this all the time. Sorry, yes, marketing do this all the time. I think councils can start doing this sort of thing. I think local authorities can start doing this sort of thing. And this technology enables us to do that, to focus the information at people who we know would be interested in that, and it would support them.
Yeah, remember, that makes perfect sense.
Good, thank you.
And also presumably, if a class has been cancelled, etc. So the other point that I remember now, in terms of, and this is very much particularly talk community and trying to justify, maybe justify is too strong a word, trying to show what the value of that talk community approach is. And that's that social return on investment. And so we're doing this transformation, we're linking all the dots together at the community level. So presumably somewhere in this transformation and the money that we're putting into it, we are then going to be able to show the fact that we have a population that is living happier, more independent lives. And that presumably is one of our major missions outcomes of this.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Davis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I'm really enthused by the technology-enabled living programme, but it does have its drawbacks. The ability to, first of all, I'm assuming that we need to have some kind of Wi-Fi capability in every single property of every elderly person. I know many who don't have that Wi-Fi or broadband or internet access in their homes, and this could be a constraint on who we could provide this service to. What are the thoughts on overcoming that obstacle?
Yes, you're quite right, Councillor Davis, to bring that up. I'm sorry, it was in my head to mention this. I mean, the challenges are both in terms of broadband activity access and also telephony. A lot of this is done by SIM card, and that is the approach we're taking. We're saying where we do not have permanently always on, always reliable broadband, then actually we can support this using universal SIM cards through telephony, and that's a very important part of what we do. And I have been discussing that with my corporate colleagues at the moment in terms of the digital programme that we do across the corporate council at the moment, to say we need to recognise that we need to use a combination of broadband approach, internet or Wi-Fi, whichever phrase you want to use, but broadband is the normal word to use. Broadband approach and SIM-based telephony. And actually what happens is they use the word fallback. If one isn't working, it falls back to the other. And we're developing that at the moment. But you're quite right. The other aspect, so that's there, it needs to be always on, always reliable. And the other aspect on this, which I should have mentioned, is that we need to work through still the fact that there is a cost to this. Not just the cost of the council, of course, but actually that's not so much of a problem. The cost is actually, at the moment, I don't know what one pays for a broadband now, £30, £40, 20, 30, £40. So there is a cost to the customer in all of this, and we need to recognise that that's a matter. But again, the situation that is happening is every telephone call we make will be a broadband telephone call. That's already here. That's nationally happening. If anybody had what my mother used to call a telephone put in, now it is going to be a broadband telephone. It is not going to be an analog telephone, and that's happening here in Herefordshire now. But there is an issue there in terms of saying yes. In order to have this, I need to have a broadband connection, and there might be a cost to that. But we also say, okay, what we do is have a backup through the SIM, or indeed the other way around. Yeah. Does that help, Councillor Davis?
Yes, thank you.
It's rather ironic.
Yes.
Technology is not perhaps the best, and it does sound a bit like you're underwater, but I think we've got everything covered.
It makes your point very, very well indeed.
On purpose. No. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Really,
Thank you.
it's brilliant. And we look forward to November because you'll come back, I'm sure.
We'd be very, very, very pleased to.
Thank you. Henry.
So I'm really conscious you've had a long afternoon and we've thrown a lot at you, but I hope it's been interesting.
Lee Lucas all up.
Yeah. So the final part of today's presentation is around Talk Community. Leslie is the interim service director. She's only been here 11 days. So she's acting, so Amy Pitt, as we know, has got a seconded role corporately, and Leslie has come in for the next 12 months to cover the role. So I'm going to hand over to Leslie to talk to you about Talk Community. We mentioned it, I think, in every part of the presentation today, so it's probably apt that we finish with Talk Community.
What an amazing set of services in one part of an organisation. And Lee did steal this is my second time I've been lead as part of my induction, and I'm now getting worried about aging. My fridges because I do not take that gin out. That's why. But I think what is interesting, because we brought this at the end, I think it's all about intelligence. That's what we've been talking about today, is that it's all about intelligence, using health data really well. It's using the tools that the private sector has been using for years. They've been using algorithms. I turned 60 on Facebook. They kept telling me I needed to look into funeral plans, and all of that sort of stuff. And interestingly, Councillor Crockett, I drove up from London today and listened to a big conversation about AI. Like many technologies, has the potential to just do amazing things. But we've got those of us who are maybe not as techo folks as techo, maybe we need to really work hard to learn so that we can, be guardians. So my sense of Talk Community, and it is fantastic to be able to support the council's initiative there, is that it has the opportunity to provide that soft intelligence, but also to be that conduit between agencies, across the patch, voluntary sector, but also statutory agencies. I've been trying to work out where it came from since I got here, and I found out that it was actually launched in Volunteer Week in 2021. And as far as I can tell, it sort of grew out of a response that we all saw wherever we were living, to have amazing social capital that COVID unlocked in our communities. I mean, I live in London. We saw a different type of volunteer in London that we'd ever seen before, partly because people had nothing to do, and it was a good way to get out. I mean, I'm not saying that's why people did it, but people generally wanted to help. And we all talked about how wouldn't it be great if some of the negatives of COVID manifested in some positives and we carried on. I don't think in many places we have carried on. That community glue has dissolved quite a bit in some places. What I think we have here is, I think you've got a fantastic foundation, you've got 56 hubs, and this just sets up, I won't read it out, one of the things that I've been talking to Hilary about, and when I meet Councillor Gandy, hopefully she'd agree, what we've talked about is having to do a bit of a review. Where are we at? How is it helping? Where isn't it helping? There is a lot of expectation around it, and we need to make sure it can deliver. Thank you very much. That's a very good move, my lovely assistant Daly. This shows you the scale. So for me, there's a significant amount of activity. You've got 56 hubs. It's done a lot of work with individuals around cost of living. It's done work signposted with the health lifestyles coordinators that are funded by public health. There's community growth. This is the community development function. of the council, but it's a community development function that has got its footprint in 56 communities. I don't know how well they're all working. I am aware that some councillors say that their residents say that they're not doing anything, because I heard that in a meeting today. I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think that we need to do the review. I'm talking to Hilary and colleagues about how to frame that. And the biggest challenge we have when Councillor Thomas asked earlier, how do we respond to increasing demand? And it has to be prevention. There's not a single local authority or other organisation working in the public sector not thinking about prevention. To the extent that Councillor Dykes has mentioned the leisure pivot to health and wellbeing rather than just recreation. And the challenge is it's not very easy to evidence whether it's working. And nowhere is it finding that easy to do. So we have to try and factor that into our work as well. And I think for me, talk community is a concerted and planned way to harness the knowledge and capacity of individuals and communities support each other. I think the point of sometimes people, it's a bit like where libraries are often very trusted because the library member of staff is seen as a trusted person, they're not seen as part of the council with a view. And I think it can be easier to hear advice sometimes from somebody who isn't professional, or a friend saying, well, why don't you try this, and why don't you go there? You could find about this. We have the Talk Community website, which we are reinvigorating. But I think if we don't start using risk intelligence and finding ways to use the intelligence in very purposeful ways, so I think it's an intelligence-led and knowledge-led service, but it's being delivered through people and that connectedness. And I think it's also important because I think the point Henry made at the very beginning, connected community is where people are doing something in their community and they're feeling connected to people. And I'm sure there are some people out there still who are volunteering after COVID who are getting benefits from that. I think new technology is very important, but as a woman who orders a lot online, let me tell you, every time I order something online, the post company sends me a hard copy brochure as well. So I think different levels of communication. So I've been here 11 days. We're going to scope out what we would like to review. I'm sure we would engage with you about the questions that we might want to ask and how we do it. We have the opportunity to perhaps apply for external funding to get somebody to help us evaluate, but I think it's something that we need to do in the next six months. I'd quite like to do it at pace because I think as an organisation, councils have some serious pressure. I think the more knowledge we have about the cost and the value of all our services, the better place you are as councillors to make the right decisions. And the challenges and opportunities are up there. Challenges, evidence, opportunity, community capacity. And I'd also go to put it a clean, even though these services are not part of your brief, leisure services in the museum and the library service have a considerable role to play in health and wellbeing. And I know that they're integrated to some extent with talk communities, but I think there's more integration to be achieved. Oh, I wasn't quite as enthusiastic. That's it for you. The next time I come back, I'm going to blow him away.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
It's really refreshing. We've had a couple of excellent officers giving us some food for thought on that one. Actually, I am involved in technology because I'm a member of the ChatGPT site, so that's another issue, I suppose. Okay, any questions? Here we are. Councillor Tillett.
Hello, Leslie. Welcome. Just mention my name to Amy, Nikki, Philip, and your reaction their reaction may involve a roll of the eyes and a slight grind of the teeth. Only because I absolutely passionately believe in the Talk Community project, but I have also, because I am very involved in several of the hubs, I'm very conscious of the challenges and where perhaps it hasn't delivered. So the fact that you're going to carry out a review, and I know Councillor Gandy is listening, so and that is also music to my ears. I do think it does need reviewing. There is much commend it. There is much good work that's being done there, but there is, and this has sort of kind of been my bugbear, and I've been like a terrier with a bone, and it's no wonder that Amy's moved position. There is a real problem with understanding and engagement, particularly by the people who most would benefit from these services. And certainly, you know, one of the hubs that I am involved in, its profile as a hub is quite low key, and I suspect if you asked the majority of people who are at that event every week, they would still say, I don't really know what Talk Community is. And my concern over these last 2 years or so since it started is that it has felt at times that there has been a rush for quantity and not necessarily quality. Or indeed to go, we tried that place, but actually it's not really worth the investment. You know, I can tell you stories of laptops that don't even get switched on, let alone used, and that's poor investment from the council's point of view. So, you know, and especially now with the super hubs and the investment involved there, time is ripe for a review, and I urge you, as you clearly do, want to get on with it ASAP. Yes, good. Thank you.
And I'll just say it's interesting because I think just because you put something there that's good for people doesn't mean that good could be good for people. Doesn't mean that the people who will most benefit will use it. And I've got a really interesting library analogy. Some years ago there was a survey in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Britain and area. 76-78% of the population think libraries are really good things. 44 to 46% of people use them. And there's a trust out there, the Carnegie Foundation, that does a lot of work in health and wellbeing and all this sort of stuff. And they came up with some two issues that I thought were interesting. One, libraries are really bad at marketing themselves, partly because we had the marketing officer taken away years ago and we felt sorry for ourselves and didn't get around to doing it. But also, again, and it's a bit like, we have to have universal services. But if you're not doing the right targeting within that universal service, then the people who could most benefit aren't. And I've got a real bugbear on libraries. You know, we should run summer reading challenge across all our libraries, but there might be one library where an intervention that's a bit more around school readiness and reading, because we've got the numbers to do it. And I think that might be the same possibly in Talk Communities. One size doesn't fit all. It is hard to find. I looked up carers, how to find a carers grant in Herefordshire, and Talk Community didn't come up on the first page. And I'm completely new. And one of the benefits to your organisation of having an interim is we can be like terriers with bones as well. So please share your views with me. Councillor Kevin.
You know, this is an anecdote, and it's not meant as a criticism. And Hilary was very quick to respond to it. But even once the Talk Community project was launched and underway, several months down the line, if you used the council's own website, it referred you to Wish, which was actually the precursor. So month to month after we'd launched it, we were still not even promoting it ourselves. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that that is now the case, but it's symptomatic of exactly the problem that you just said. And I'd say a root and branch review of what we're doing, where we're doing it, and how relevant, how much uptake, how much engagement there is absolutely critical. And yes, you have my full support in doing that, as do you, Councillor Gandy.
And I completely agree with you, Councillor Tillett, and I'm sure if we had time, Joe, who's the communications officer for this area, would have much to say about it. I think what we need to do is really get that unique selling point out there so that there is a strap line perhaps, so that people understand what it is. But again, thank you. Another breath of fresh air. Okay, any other questions or comments from anyone? So Thomas, just worry that we're only 4 minutes left.
It's going to take that. the word talk community, when I first heard it, I thought,
Yeah.
now is it the right word? Is it the right title? Because I think myself as a fairly intelligent person, interested in the community. That's why I come on as a councillor. But I thought, no, that was my sort of reaction. I'm now beginning to know it's far more important. But is it the right name? I don't know. Is this a Herefordshire name or is this a national name?
No, it's a Herefordshire name.
Right.
We will look at all of those issues.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, so I would like to now turn to Councillor Gamby. I thank you for your patience, and I think if you can just give us a roundup of your thoughts on this. It's been a very eventful afternoon, so thanks for bearing with.
That's fine. It's been a very interesting afternoon, and everybody that's presented their area may not necessarily have said it with the same enthusiasm, but I know full well that they have the same enthusiasm for their area as everybody else does. During my short time as portfolio holder, I've met with the social workers here, and I know that they are in adults doing a really good job, and I have to say I think a lot of time has been spent, and rightly so, on talking and discussing in council and various meetings about social workers within children's services and the difficulties that they have to cope with, but nobody seems to recognise in the same way the amount of work that the adult social workers give, and I have had the chance to do that. I've also been to Halo, so I've seen some of the work that's been going on there with social prescribing, and I've talked to the people who've been taking part in that exercise, and it really is a good scheme. And there are a number of other places that I'm going to in the next few weeks. I think the issue regarding council houses, I come from a local authority that has 6,500 council houses, and that's fine, but the background support that you require to look after any number of council houses, you need at least 2,000 council houses before it even breaks even. So it's definitely a non-starter as far as I'm concerned, but it doesn't mean to say that if we've got land which we own, we cannot find ways of providing accommodation that is fit for people in Herefordshire who cannot afford to buy or rent in the way that the things are at the moment. So I am certainly looking at what we can do with land that we own to reduce the people who are homeless or who are living in temporary accommodation or are on our housing list and perhaps are living in very overcrowded accommodation or are sofa surfing. Regarding talk community, it works in places. I think the figures don't fill me with a lot of pleasure. If I read it rightly, we only actually had, when I looked at in a quarter, we had something like 1,700 visits. That works out about 26 people a day, a working day, across the whole of the 76 hubs. So that's not really very many. But I know that some of the hubs work really, really well and some don't. And we need to review it for that reason. We also need to look at the fact that not everybody can access a hub. They either cannot physically access it or emotionally access it, or they just don't have the public transport to actually get to it. And the majority of our county is very, very rural, as is the ward I live in, probably the most rural. And therefore, even if there is a hub, as there is in my own ward, only the people who live in that particular parish could access it, because unless you've got a car, there's no public transport at all. So I think the discussions we had today were good. I think the main issue for adults health and wellbeing is the fact that we have got an ever increasing demand for services. We don't actually know how big a demand that is, and yet we are obviously being required to make savings, and we will at the end of this financial year be required to come in on budget, and that means we're going to have to make some really difficult decisions. But from my point of view, my view is always been that in some cases it's really important that you invest in order to save, and that you don't necessarily get immediate sort of benefit from what you spend, but you do in the longer term. But I think the actual reports today were very, very, very good and very helpful. So thank you. And so were the questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gandhi. Your input is always welcome. Okay, right, very wary of the time. I'm sorry, it's 5.
On that point, Chair, would you mind making a determination that we continue on 3 hours duration?
Yes, as long as everybody's happy, we'll hopefully get through this in the next 10-15 minutes.
Cool.
Are we okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got a parish church.
I've got a parish and another one before.
So
let's fix it followed by 7.
Might I suggest, Chair, if you need to go soon, perhaps we should, perhaps the committee would like a quick work programme meeting at time to suit in the week.
Yeah.
In the next week or two. I can do that.
I'll be here.
No question.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just finish off with that agenda item. So as there aren't any recommendations to be noted, are the committee members content with just noting the presentations? Thank you, everybody in agreement with that. And again, thank you all for your attendance. So just looking at the work programme, as the scrutiny officers just recommended that we take this to another meeting.
We can meet offline at some point in the next few weeks or so, and we can get through the work programme. It's just that this meeting's generated a lot of ideas, and I know the Chair and I have been chuntering about it, so it'd be good to go through some of those and talk about when you want to do them and when you want to absorb them into fairly general items in the programme already.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we've already cited many of these agenda items already, so we can move on from that one.
Madam Chair, could I suggest that we send an email out?
Yeah.
And we all reply to it.
Yes.
And put the questions in, to simply reply.
Yeah.
Then can be edited down to the 5 most important or.
Yeah. We can do that, thank you. So we'll quickly move on then to item 9, which is the future meeting dates. And they are as per page 3 of the agenda. The next meeting is on the 20th of November, and we look forward to everybody coming to that meeting. And again, thank you very much for your attendance. I'm sorry we just ran over a little bit of time, but I think it was a very worthy discussion.